Good afternoon, everyone. Assalamu alaikum, ma'am. For the record, my name is Tanya Fernandes Anderson, the District 7 City Councilor. I am the chair of the Boston City Council Committee on Ways and Means. This hearing is being recorded and will be broadcasted on Xfinity Channel 8, RCN Channel 82, and Fios Channel 964. The Council's budget review process will encompass a series of public hearings beginning in April and running through June. We strongly encourage residents to take a moment to engage in this process by giving testimony for the record. You can do this in several ways. Attend one of our hearings and give public testimony. We will take public testimony at the end of each departmental hearing and also at 3 hearings dedicated to public testimony. The full hearing schedule is on our website, boston.gov/council-budget. Our scheduled hearings dedicated to public testimony are Tuesday, May 2nd at 2 p.m., Tuesday, May 9th at 6 p.m., and Thursday, May 18th at 2 p.m. You can give testimony in person here at the 12th Baptist Church today. For in-person testimony, please sign up at the sheet near the entrance. When you are called to testify, please state your name, affiliation, residence, and limit your comments to just a couple of minutes to ensure that all comments and concerns can be heard. You can email a written testimony to the committee at ccc.wm@boston.gov. Submit a 2-minute video or of your testimony through the form on the website. For more information on the City Council budget process and how to testify, please visit the City Council's budget website at boston.gov/council-budget. Today's hearing is on dockets 0760 to 0762, orders for the FY24 operating budget and including annual appropriations for departmental operations for the school department and for the post-employment benefits OPEB, docket 0763, 0765 to 0766, orders for capital fund transfer appropriations, docket 0764, 0767 to 0768, orders for the capital budget including loan orders and lease purchase agreements. Our focus area for this hearing will be an overview of the fiscal year 24 capital budget. Our panelists today includes Ashley Grafenberger, Chief Financial Officer, Collector Treasury, City of Boston; Jim Williamson, Director of Office of Budget Management; Mariangelis Solis Cervera, I guess she'll be joining us shortly, Chief of Equity. So she's not here yet. Yasha Franklin Hodge, Chief of Streets; Reverend Mariama White Hammond, Chief of Energy, Environment, and Open Space; Ryan Woods, Parks Commissioner; Del Stanislaus?
Should be joining us.
So absent? Thank you. Thank you. Sam DePina, Boston Public Schools Deputy Superintendent of Operations; Jack Hanlon. Thank you. Deputy Director, Capital of Office of Budget Management; Ian Donnelly, Assistant Director of Capital OBM; Dion Irish, Chief of Operations; Carrie Griffin, Director of Public Facility Department; Carlton Jones, Director of Public Facility Department; Ellen McDonough. Yeah. Susan Rice, Assistant Director of Operations, also Public Facility; Kathy Baker Eclipse, Director of Capital Plan, Parks and Recreation. For the sake of, I have everybody who's sitting on the panel, correct? Okay, so who is speaking on behalf of BPS? Just yourself? Okay, thank you. And who is speaking on behalf of Parks today? Just
Mariana.
Chief? Chief, you'll be speaking today? Both alternate? All right, that's great. That's not fine. Just so that we can have like a coordinated format, and so I know who, so we're not like going back and forth, and it's a small room with noise, and keeping it consistent. And if you need to, I guess, change, let me know, and we'll figure it out. So in terms of format for today, first I just wanted to, acknowledge my council colleagues here so far. District Councilor Braden, Councilor President Flynn, at-large Councilor Murphy, District Councilor Brian Worrell, and District Councilor Kenzie Bach. Thank you so much for being here. In terms of our format this evening, we will first go for rounds of introductions from my council colleagues, just 30 seconds each for opening statements. Then we'll go straight to the administration. I will ask that each department presents in less than, not each department, but OBMs are rather, Ashley and Jim, if you can present within 10 to 15 minutes. If you are adding anyone from the different departments, you may have 5 minutes to add anything to the presentation. And then immediately we will take public testimony first, and then we'll go to council colleagues for first round of question, and then second round, third round, and so forth, if time permits. Just for our opening, I think I'll go first to my council colleagues and then come back to myself. Councilor Braden, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I want to thank the folks here at the historic 12th Baptist Church for hosting us this evening. Thank you to all the members of the public who have come along to hear about our capital budget, and all the council central staff who put the show on the road and took us out to Roxbury this afternoon. And also the administration, all the folks on the panel, and others in the audience who are here to help us understand and get a handle on our city budget, especially in relation to capital projects. It's a very, very important part of the budget, and it lays a path for the way forward. And as district councillors, we are acutely interested in the plans for capital improvements in our districts. So thank you all for being here this evening. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Braden. Councilor President Flynn, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and want to say thank you to the administration team that's here with us. Want to say thank you to the public for coming out, and to City Council Central staff and my City Council colleagues as well, and also a special thank you to the historic 12th Baptist Church for the incredible role that they play in our neighborhoods, but also for hosting us here today, and to acknowledge Reverend Bodrick, who's with us tonight. I'm gonna withhold my opening statement, but just want to say thank you to everyone for working together. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much, Council President Flynn. You ain't gonna be stealing my thunder too long, all right? Councilor, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge Pastor Reverend Willie Broderick, and allow you a couple of minutes for introduction. Thank you so much for allowing us a space, and you have the floor.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Reverend Willie Broderick II, Senior Pastor here at the historic 12th Baptist Church. I want to welcome you to our space. This is such an important meeting and such an important gathering. I want to thank my district counselor. I want to thank each and every one of you for the work that you do for this city. And most importantly, thank this community for showing up in every way, in every facet. We're excited for all the great things that will come from this great work that we do together. But most importantly, we want to make sure that we're centering our community, centering our families, and making sure that we create access, opportunity, and inclusion for each and every person in the city of Boston. So thank you to each and every one of you. Welcome to our space, and we look forward to all the comments that will come out of this evening.
Thank you so much. And before I move on, I'd like to acknowledge Imam Abdullah Farouk from Masjid Alhamdulillah. If you'd like to take 30 seconds to introduce yourself. And
I've come to listen. I just ask God to may His mercy descend upon this gathering, and maybe we get some benefit from Him, that what we do here this evening is pleasing to Him.
thank you. And Councilor Murphy, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Pastor Reverend Broderick, and to the community. We're here outside of City Hall so that we can hear directly. I know you're always welcome in City Hall and in the Ionella Chamber, but thank you, Chair, for hosting this in the community. And as an at-large city councilor, I do enjoy that no matter what district I go to, it is also my district, so I'm proud to represent this church and this neighborhood also. And thank you always to the administration. I know we had a hearing earlier and many of the familiar faces. And I said it earlier, and it's true, though, that our budget is a value statement of what we believe in and where we want to invest for our future, for our seniors, for our veterans, for our children, for this city, staying healthy, moving forward, and looking forward to this conversation and hearing from the community. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Murphy. Councilor Rowe, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to our host, Historic 12th Baptist, and Pastor Willie Broderick. Thank you to the public. Thank you for showing up and taking time out of your day for this important conversation. I also want to just say thank you to the admin for all the hard work and time that you put into the city of Boston. And also thank you to Councilor Anderson for having insight and bringing the budget to the people. I want to say thank you for that. That's all my questions, comments for now, and I'll leave it for the round of questioning.
Thank you, Councilor Rowe. Councilor Bach, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'll just add to everyone's thanks to 12th Baptist for hosting us, and to you for holding this, and our administration partners for being here. I would just say that to me, the capital budget, the investments that the city makes in our public goods are one of the most enduring things we do with our money each year. And in many ways, they're the way in which we leave a really long-term legacy and create a city for all. So I always think of this as one of the most important hearings that we have every budget cycle, and I'm really glad to get to be here for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Bach. Councilor Mejia, you have the floor.
Good evening, everyone. Happy to be here, and I don't know how Chief Hammond beat me here because we left at the same time. But nonetheless, I'm here. But I just wanted to thank 12 Baptist for hosting, and more importantly for everybody that has shown up, right? Because we have to show up for the things that matter, and having people here in the space really speaks volumes to what this moment is all about. And I also want to thank my colleague, Councilor Anderson, for bringing literally the people's budget to the streets, right here where it belongs, where we can listen and learn from each other and really hold ourselves accountable to what that work is. So it's really symbolic for us to have a budget conversation in Roxbury, and I just want to thank you for your leadership in bringing us here, and I look forward to the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Mejia. I'd like to just preface our conversation today by saying that the role that we have in the city is one of such importance because we are closer to our constituents, we are in our districts, we are organizing, we are planning, and we are listening to our constituents. And then there is a sort of informal conversation that takes place with the mayor where she schedules time to talk with us about our priorities, our recommendations as far as what we would like to see in the districts. The mayor doesn't always, or the administration doesn't always agree with our suggestions. She may say yes to some, no to some, or no to all. And the capital budget, because it is not under our purview, the councilor purview, we do not have say in terms of what gets approved and what doesn't. So I wanted to make sure that I communicate that so that folks understand that this is, what you will see is a combination of conversations between department chiefs, and they don't have a full say either, but they do make recommendations. And then it goes into a process, or at least they probably start these conversations prior to us, where they are communicating with the mayor and submitting a memo, if not a formal written statement, about their priorities and what they feel that each district or each neighborhood needs in terms of capital proposals. And then the mayor also obviously may decline or approve or say no to everything or say yes to everything. And so here we are, the proposal that we will present today. We will get a presentation shortly from the administration. The administration then does the best that they can in terms of fitting it all into the $4.2 billion that you will see today. And so what we want to hear from you is to understand, and we want to break it down transparently so that you see things or the proposal for what it is. A lot of it will be that things have been in planning for years, and I've heard this from the administration, that because things have been in planning for years, that they have already in design process, or they've already been in a study for it, that it's ready to go to the next phase. And then sometimes you'll see that a community, for example, one example I'll give is Charlestown, who yelled about a swimming pool just last year, but then they end up getting a $30 million swimming pool. And so what we want to do is transparently have this conversation, respectfully and with integrity, I hope, that this is not a personal with administration and the people here before you, that these are hardworking people and people in leadership that are trying to execute and implement such plans. And so the conversation is just to create transparency, is to just to communicate, to convey the message to the community so that the community is able to access the information and hopefully be able to navigate the information to advocate here today and also in the future for their community needs. And so we're tasked with this responsibility of consolidating community, of representing people. It's a very heavy weight, and so we have to do that, hopefully, again, with integrity and honesty and transparency. We owe it to our constituents, and not because they're here in front of me. You guys know that this is how I sound even in City Hall. But I know that my colleagues here, we have very robust council this year that have been working hard in advocating. So we hope to have a wonderful conversation with you. And we hope to do that, again, respectfully. And hopefully we'll get to some sort of closure in terms of this conversation. And if not, I am open to continuing the hearing to hold another capital hearing. I do have times reserved, whereas I can schedule another meeting. So it's not the end-all, be-all today. I can schedule another capital hearing until we get more answers from the conversation. I'd like to acknowledge that our council colleague, Councilor Lujan, has joined us. Councilor Lujan, I will allow you 30 seconds on the floor to make an introduction.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good evening, everyone. I'm happy to be with you. Apologies for the delay. These books are pretty heavy that have the budget. But no, I want to thank the administration for being here. I want to thank my colleagues because this is one of the biggest obligations that we have as members of the City Council to make sure that our dollars, that your dollars, are being used responsibly and in the ways that does the work of equity, which is about correcting our past policy harms to make sure that folks in neighborhoods that have been historically excluded are really centered in the conversation. You know, we have a very quick timeline to take a look at not only the operating budget and the capital budgets, and sometimes I feel like the two should actually maybe be divorced if we are to fully be doing the work of the people and making sure that we are understanding what's happening and that we're able to do the work of advocacy. But I know that with this administration, a lot that is in the capital plan is going to reflect what we want to see in the future, that we want to see in the city of Boston. I know that there's more work to do. I am particularly keen and interested in how we're using our fiscal strength as a city to do the work of the people. We have a AAA bond rating as a city, and a lot of our residents in our Black and brown neighborhoods don't feel that fiscal strength. And so I think it's time for us to really lean into that. I probably have spoken for more than 30 seconds, so I will stop. But thank you, Madam Chair, for your work, and I look forward to this hearing.
Thank you. Chief, you have the floor.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Ashley Grofberger, and I'm the Chief Financial Officer for the City of Boston. I'm pleased to be here with you all this evening to present the fiscal 2024 through 2028 five-year capital plan. I'm joined by several of my cabinet and department colleagues.
Excuse me a moment.
Oh, sure.
My apologies. Is it better if we turn off the lights to see this? Can everyone see this okay? We're good? Okay, sorry.
Thank you. Joined by several of my cabinet and department colleagues with you this evening. I'd like to thank you all for being here. Thanks for coming out to hear about this. To the counselors also for hosting this hearing. Also like to thank the mayor, her team, members across the cabinet, and in particular the budget team for their work and leadership on crafting this plan. Change the slide. Okay. So the fiscal 2024 through 2028 five-year capital plan totals $4.2 billion, which is an increase of about, I think, $600 million over the prior five-year plan. The capital plan supports a vast number of city assets and inventory, including our roads, our bridges, parks, libraries, and community centers, as well as city facilities such as City Hall. The plan is funded through a variety of sources, including various state and federal grant programs and sources, but is predominantly financed through the city's use of general obligation or GO bonds. As was mentioned, the city has benefited from a AAA bond rating, which is the best you can have for the last 9 years, which allows us to borrow funds that finance this plan at the lowest cost, and that really allows us to maximize our dollars for the work and for the infrastructure rather than paying for debt servicing costs. The five-year plan is organized into two categories. First is projects. You'll hear us refer to projects, which are specific investments in capital improvements at a particular site or location, such as a particular neighborhood library or a fire station. And we also, the plan also includes a number of programs, which are recurring annual capital expenditures for broader needs across the city, like road resurfacing, fire equipment replacement, and tree planting. The plan is bounded by specific statutory limits, meaning that there are rules which dictate how much we can borrow and what we can spend it on. And lastly, I think it's important to mention that while this is a five-year plan, it is revisited every year, and we can reevaluate the choices and assumptions included in here. And we do this five-year planning because the life cycle of these projects exceed that of a typical fiscal year, and there are many factors that go into making decisions around these projects, and so it's better to look at them over a longer life cycle as opposed to just 1 year at a time. So with that, I'm happy to turn it over to Jim Williamson to give a little bit more of the background on what's included in this plan.
Thank you, Ashley. So my name is Jim Williamson. I'm the budget director at the City of Boston, and what the budget office does is annually help put together the annual operating budget, which is the pieces that deliver services you're probably very familiar with, and also helps construct or re-up the capital plan, basically look at it, take out projects that are completed, add new projects that fit within the fiscal constraints of the plan. So we're going to talk about just different ways of looking at the capital plan. So, but we want to start with like how the capital plan priorities are set. So this is sort of a process wheel, and it starts around what the mayoral and community values are. And it begins with a framework of these values centered on equity. We have Chief Mariangeli Solis Severa, who we're in deep partnership, who sort of helps us support us in that capacity. Access, health and safety, one of the key components of a project that makes it included is there a health and safety issue at stake. That gets priority on. And then we move into department project priority requests. So we look to the department experts. The panel before us are those types of experts. They know their assets. They operate those assets. They set the relative priorities and ultimately operationalize the execution of those projects. And then where OBM comes in, the budget office comes in, is we evaluate the financing, the fiscal needs, the cost estimates. We look at it within the context of existing commitments. You need to make sure you're taking care of your prior commitments before you can layer on new commitments. And looking at scope, location, and impact. And then there is other engagement elements where we look to the mayor's leadership team. We engage with the city council to hear. A lot of these feedback sources are they're complementary. They're often similar. So a thing that you would hear from a city councilor might be expressed by the mayor's team, might be expressed by the Office of Neighborhood Services, might be as city residents in the city we've observed ourselves. So all of these elements are complementary and help inform sort of what needs to be done in the capital plan. And then this is the part of the process. And thank you again for hosting us in your location in partnership with the council, because this is the part where we work through the projects and we review it with city council, who needs to authorize the projects. So we'll go into here is how this $4.2 billion capital plan is organized. So it's mostly like functionally, the streets and infrastructure. Yasha Franklin Hodges here to represent that. Schools is a big component of it. So we have Sam DePina from the Deputy Superintendent of Operations, who's familiar with schools and their needs. So all of these are different slices of how this capital plan is organized. In open space, environment and open space, Chief Mariama White-Hammond and Ryan are here to sort of talk about how they prioritize within their individual cabinets for advancing capital work. Just to circle back to how when Ashley was talking about how the plan is organized, there are major improvements, renovations. So beyond just the brand new building that occasionally will pop up, there are lots of major renovations going on. The second one is the new construction. Probably the last major building that was a school building in Fenway that was opened. State of good repair, that's where a lot of making sure the roads are in good condition, making sure our parks, fields, and tot lots are in good condition. There's a component that's planning, and then there's equipment and technology that meets the useful life of capital funding. So this is the revenue that supports the capital plan, the 4.2. So it's primarily funded through city bonds. So city bonds do have a requirement. We just got through a bond sale just recently. There's a lot of process associated with that. I respect other members of the finance cabinet and all the due diligence that we go through, because you're basically committing to, on the full faith and credit of the city, paying those bonds back. And this credit rating, this rating is sort of supports that. They say, what is the city's experience with managing their funds? Do they have a history of paying their debt appropriately and honoring all of their long-term commitments? So bonds are a critical component. There are federal grants and state grants and other grants. So this is the mix, but it's primarily bond funds. So here is the capital plan organized by who implements it. So I want to shout out to Chief Dion Irish, who is the Chief of Operations, and Director Kerry Griffin, because they're ultimately the implementers of roughly half the capital plan. And they work with departments. With the terminology is to have the care, custody, and control of a building. And when you think about a building, whether it's a school, whether it's a police station or a firehouse or a library, that's just a tool to deliver city services. It's a location to provide little city services. And that operational agency that occupies that building is the expert on delivering those services, and they have certain requirements of their facility. So they work collaboratively with Chief Irish and Director Kerry Griffin to make sure that when they're having renovations or building a new facility, that it meets those operational needs. Because at the end of the day, it's really about those assets are a tool to deliver services. And in the streets cabinet, mobility and transportation, many of us, worked to get here. That's back. I appreciate that, Councilor. So, getting around the city, everybody has that feeling of being able to get where you need to be, the conditions of the road. Those are very important things. In parks and open space, I think we all enjoy being near green space. We know it's part of our health to do that. We also are stepping up to Councilor Lujan's point about using some of our bonding authority, particularly in housing. So we're really stepped up our use of bond funds. It's a relative new phenomenon to infuse into the housing authority. So that is a step that we're expanding into that area. And then the capital planning process it's unlike the annual operating budget, where it sort of needs to be accomplished or needs to be operationalized in a 12-month period. It takes time. So there's the project inclusion phase is when it's sort of conceived. Initial studies are often take to sort of get the scope, look at if there's programmatic, and these all have different varying different timelines. But sometimes and then it moves into like design, and it's often that's where the community process is there's our designer is hired, meetings are held in the community, and sometimes it feels from someone who's a little bit removed from the process that what's happening during that process, and we need to do a better job of letting people know the status of where things are moving through the process. But there's a lot of hard work happening in those 3 stages before you start seeing sort of shovels in the ground and construction, so we have little timelines associated with these different components. But this often many projects make it through in that 5-year window, but some of them extend beyond that depending on the complexity of the project. And before I turn it over to sort of our esteemed panel here on some of the subject, we wanted to highlight some of the capital projects that are in this capital plan, organized around some of the values that have been articulated. So supporting a green and growing city. There's $50 million in this plan to help support decarbonization efforts at Boston Public Housing Authority locations, to move them off of fossil fuels, to make it a cleaner environment. There's $1.4 million to introduce electric blue bikes into the blue bike systems. $84 million in new capital fund for the creation and maintenance of city parks. $58 million in capital funds for public transit, sidewalk improvements, city infrastructure that supports walking and biking. Then there's the category of ensuring public health and safety, $30 million for new funding for redesign of our streets with a focus on safety. Safety, I think we heard a lot of that at the earlier hearing today, and we know it's a preeminent concern of a lot of residents, many of the councils, is pedestrian safety. Making families first. We strive to be a family-friendly city that's first in the nation for families. So they're in that effort. We're building new libraries in Codman Square and Fields Corner and Eggleston Square. And there's $178 million in new capital funding for construction and renovating BCYF community centers, including pools. And then, just getting back to what the city is, what is the role, how does city government improve people's lives or support people's lives? We're focusing on delivering exceptional city services. So there's an upgrade to the city's 301 platform, and it provide a higher level of service to every resident, trying to integrate a lot of the touch points that residents have with city government, whether it's through inspectional services or permitting. And then there's $147 million to keep our bridges and stairs and walking paths in a state of good repair. So that's safety. You want to make sure your assets are in a good state of repair. And with that, I will turn it over to Sam to sort of walk through some of the slides on schools.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Hope everyone can hear me. Just want to publicly thank all my colleagues here today to help get us to this point and the work we do day to day to spend some of this money on some of the services and programs designed here today. I'm also joined this evening by my Executive Director of Facilities Management, Brian Ford. He's here in the audience, as well as Del Stanislaus and KC, who was sitting in the back, who just recently joined us as well. With regard to the capital investments for Boston Public Schools, we're just very thankful for the mayor's investment in the Green New Deal for Boston Public Schools. That includes a $2 million investment, or over $2 million investment, in new and renovated school buildings. This includes Madison Park Technical Vocational High School and Mel King, just for examples, and others listed on the slide. This investment also includes resources for new construction projects altogether, such as the Carter School and the Desai Quincy Upper School, just to name a few, and the others listed on the slide as well. And lastly, we also invest in health and safety issues that are ongoing in our schools, such as investing in 16 bathroom upgrades that we're in the process of doing. Next slide, please. And finally, this proposal includes resources dedicated to maintaining and repairing our current systems in our school buildings and within our school buildings. It includes the categories listed here. They include swimming pools, they include ceiling, floor, and painting projects, elevator restoration upgrades, schoolyard improvements, HVAC upgrades, and masonry and building envelopes and security measures, as you can see on the slide. So I don't want to go into too many details now, but we're here to answer any questions you have going forward. So pass it back.
Good evening, everybody. First, thank you, councilors, for the opportunity to be here to speak on the capital plan. I also want to acknowledge Mayor Wu and express my appreciation for her investments in this plan, or proposed investments in this plan in the city's streets. I'll go through a few of the specific areas where we are making investments in this capital plan, but first I just want to emphasize a little bit of what our priorities and our values are when it comes to the things that we are choosing to invest in with this plan. First, as several other people have mentioned, the importance of maintaining a state of good repair on the many assets the city has, the streets, the sidewalks, the bridges, the footpaths, the stairs, all of the different things that we provide on the city streets need maintenance. In some cases, if we're speaking of our bridges, often extensive and expensive maintenance. So first and foremost, we want to make sure that those public assets continue to serve the public well, and that means engaging in a regular plan of repair and maintenance to keep them in good condition. Second, safety. As many others have mentioned, and I'm sure we'll talk more about tonight, there is nothing that I hear about more consistently when I go around the city in every single neighborhood than concerns about safety. It does not matter where you are, people are worried, they fear for their kids, for their grandparents, they fear for themselves as they move about. There is excessive speeding, there's unsafe driving behavior that ultimately we know that we can do more with our infrastructure to keep people safe as they go about their daily business, whether they are driving, walking, biking, taking transit. There's investments that we need to make to transform some of our infrastructure to make it a safer city. Third, Boston is a growing city, and this is a good thing. We have more residents, more neighbors, more jobs coming into the city. But we know that if every one of those people moving here or working here comes in a car driving by themselves, that we will choke off this city. We will become more congested. It will become harder to move around. It will become slower. And so we are making investments that focus on alternatives to driving, not because we think cars will or should go away, but because we know that as we grow, we need to give people good options, transit, walking, biking, that can allow them to get where they need to go to meet their needs, so that more of the trips that we make as a city can be done without relying on a car that adds traffic, that adds pollution, that adds stress and competition for parking. So with that, some of the specific things that we are investing in this capital plan, we have two major redesign projects, street redesign projects that are supported by federal RAISE grants. One on Blue Hill Ave, going from Grove Hall to Mattapan Square, and the Roxbury Resilient Corridors project, which will look right here on Warren Street, Malcolm X, and Melnia Cass, and how we can improve these corridors as multimodal corridors for the people who use them, that are safe, well-designed, and serve people's needs. We are investing in a series of new safety programs. We are consolidating some of the previous programs that we've had around neighborhood slow streets into a set of programs and investments that we believe will allow us to do more faster when it comes to things like installing speed humps on neighborhood streets, redesigning dangerous intersections, making changes to our traffic signals that allow them to move people effectively through intersections, but to do it with more safety than we have today. When it comes to this idea of mode shift and sustainability, how do we make more of our trips by transit, walking, and biking? We have $13 million in dedicated bus lane investments. We have more than 25 miles of dedicated bus lane that are currently in planning. We inaugurated our newest section in Roslindale just last week, and we have many more to come this year and over the course of the capital plan. We're making $17 million in our strategic bike network. This is supplemented with ARPA funding. Last year, the mayor announced expansion of the bike network by about 9.5 miles that we were going to build this year, and we are making good progress on that. The first of those lanes should be going onto the ground this week or next week, and we have a number of others lined up behind it. And green infrastructure is something that we are trying to weave into all of our streets projects, recognizing that streets aren't just about moving people, but they're also places. And they're places that can provide experiences in an environment that is comfortable or not, that helps manage our stormwater or not. So we are investing in the kinds of things, street trees, planted areas, stormwater collection that allows us to use our streets for more than just moving people, but to help create greener, healthier neighborhoods. And lastly, we have investments in this capital plan for electric vehicle charging as we work to accelerate the switch from fossil fuel vehicles, and as Jim mentioned, the Blue Bike system, including electric bikes. Lastly, we have numerous investments in state of good repair, and there are too many to list here, but it is tens of millions of dollars in road and sidewalk reconstruction, more than $100 million in repairing our bridges, and we have $3.5 million for stairways and footpaths, including some of the ones that our neighbors rely on, but that have fallen into a state of poor repair. We're also investing almost $60 million in a multi-year project to upgrade every single pedestrian ramp in the city to meet current ADA accessibility guidelines, something that is critically important, not only for our residents with disabilities, but for everyone. Having good ramps that are safe and clean and work makes it easier for everyone to get around the city, and that's an important investment for us. So I will stop there and hand it to Chief White-Hammond.
Good evening. So I will focus specifically on the open space piece. We could certainly talk about environment and other things that are in my cabinet, but that's where the majority of the resources that are coming to our cabinet are focused. And so we have $84 million coming to parks to support 80 different projects. Love to talk more. We probably can't go into every single one of them, but want to at least talk about how we make decisions. So for the majority of the time that parks has existed, if you looked at where we were, say, 15 years ago, we used to get about $8 million out of the capital budget. And so really the only thing we focused on was planned repairs. Really sort of what is hitting its life cycle use end and just trying to stay ahead of those. Obviously, the situation is significantly different now, and so planned repairs is still part of our conversation, but we are at a place where we don't have to just look at what's falling apart, and if we don't get to it today, it will, sort of not function. So the second piece that we really look at is community priorities, projects that have been identified by park advocates, and just being really open and thinking. I think this is one of the places where city councilors tend to do the strongest level of advocacy. Many of them want a specific park in some part of their neighborhood, and so I think we are one of the groups that there's a lot of push and pull in the capital plan around this conversation of which parks people want to really shift. Sometimes you built a park for what people needed 20 years ago, but the neighborhood has significantly changed. The number of people using the park has significantly changed. We do see things like 20 years ago, everybody wanted baseball. I'm not saying that they don't still, but we've got a whole bunch of other things. Many more communities want soccer than what was previously programmed in the past. We deal with the loving and challenging relationship between tennis players and pickleball players. It's probably, if you go to any parks conference, the hottest topic of the drama between tennis players and pickleball players. So we also have to look at what are the residents of today wanting that might have been different than what people wanted 20 years ago when the park is first designed. So really looking at those community priorities, both in terms of which parks people want to prioritize and what they want to see shifted in those parks from what it might have been in the past. The third piece is really around climate resilience. You might know and have seen and lived, I think we're all experiencing that Boston is the fourth most vulnerable city to climate change in America. The biggest reason we often end up there is because we have 47 miles of coastline, and in some instances we have parks that are right on that coastline, and so if we are able to do some serious redesign of those parks, we also can protect people. So the biggest chunk that we have in this particular budget is money for a redesign of Moakley Park, which is not going to be inexpensive. But we have a significant amount of money to get that started, and we're thinking about that specifically because it will protect two BHA housing developments that are right behind it, and it might prevent my house, which I live off of Dorchester Ave, to be from being waterfront property, as my husband likes to say, we're on the way to. And so it's not just, we are thinking not just about sea level rise and flooding. We are also thinking deeply about heat. And so we've also been looking, and you might have already sort of noticed, but it will be happening even more, that you see a lot of more water features being added into parks. That is both because people like them, but we also have a policy that says if a park is in a heat island, we need to consider water features as a priority because it may be the place that people can go to in the local area to get cool. And so climate resilience is also thinking about how many trees we're adding. There's a whole bunch of things that we're thinking about. It's not just our coastal parks, but obviously our coastal parks are one of the major investments. And then finally, executing the master plans. As many of you know, we did a few pretty big master plans this year. One of them was the urban forest plan, and so some of the investments from that are in the capital plan. But we also have done master plans for the Boston Common and Franklin Park. Those are huge, and they will take a lot of investment to operationalize over time. And so, yeah, so I'll just pause there and sort of that's sort of lays out where we are, and we can certainly, Commissioner Woods is here, and multiple members of our team that can go into the sort of nitty gritty, but I hope that gives a clear picture of sort of how we think about the big picture priorities.
Thank you, Chief. Ethan, I need to present. How do I do that?
I gotta get it up on that other laptop.
Okay. Should I email it to you?
Yeah, it might take a minute or two, but yeah, that should be fine.
Okay, thank you. Your email, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. I do apologize. What's your last name?
V-A-R-A.
3 or no 3? Thank you. Sent. Thank you so much for everyone who presented. If you could just bear with me just a couple of minutes, maybe less, to get this up.
How about them brooms?
About the Celtics.
How about them Celtics?
I just love that these chairs are still here because every time I see them, they remind me of being here for 12 Baptist Camp. I've been here for many other meetings.
We're still in session. Sorry, the conversations can't be outside of the hearing. Not on record. When recess. We're back in session. Everyone can see the screen, right? So I just wanted to, last year during the, again, thank you for all the chiefs, all the department representatives for presenting and all the hard work. And earnestly, I know that you are doing everything that you can with what you have to create equity in the proposals. And I know that you've been fighting hard to get your recommendations in the budget based on equity, but not just equity, but racial equity. And I appreciate you, Chief, for always keeping that, or at least having an equitable lens in doing this work. And all of you, I appreciate you. But we did, last year, you guys know that we have the charter amendment now in effect, and last year was the first year that we led that process. And essentially, we ended up moving funds to create a position for budget analysis on our end. And so together, I basically gave her a list of things to put together in a data visualization presentation, and I just wanted to share that with you in terms of this capital proposal. So for just the table contents, cabinet and department level funding, neighborhood level funding, district level funding. And then, again, if we don't get to all of the necessary details in this hearing, we don't want to keep people here all night. Happy to reschedule it to part 2. So for cabinets and departments, there are 82 departments. Only 15 departments have capital projects with funding requested for this year. Highest spenders you can see here by department for FY24. Boston Public Schools with $324,912,705. And I won't read all of the numbers here, but I'll just read the title of the departments. Boston Centers for Youth and Families, Boston Public Library, Parks and Recreation Department, Property Management, then Environment Department, then Mayor's Office of Housing. And you can see here that the highest spenders make up about 83.9% of the entire FY24 budget. Cabinets and departments, again, here with the highest spenders, only 17 departments have actual capital projects, as I mentioned. The project funding breakdown by department, as you can see here, and this is in millions, BCYF, Boston Public Library, Boston Public School, BPDA, Do It, Emergency Management, Environment Department, BFD, MOH, Office of Arts and Culture, Office of New Urban Mechanics, Parks and Rec, BPD, Property Management, PHC, Public Works, and Transportation Department. Public Health Commission. City funds by department, as you can see here, in terms of city funds or authorizations, for the blue representing FY24 in millions, in terms of authorization, total authorization in millions in red or orange, and the yellow, the total project. You can see here by, I've separated it by, I guess you could say like either departments, sorry. And so parks here, public schools, public works, Boston Public Schools again, and then transportation, Boston Planning and Development, Mayor's Office of Housing, Boston Centers for Youth and Families, and then so on. And here in numbers, and I'm happy to share the presentation with everybody. For city funds by department, here, I'm breaking it down whether it's coming from grants, the blue representing grants and external funds, and the yellow being total funds. So basically, where are the monies coming from? And the difference, of course, if it's coming from city dollars, then it's liquid, it's more accessible. And if it's coming from grants or bonds, it takes longer to access the funds, so that's also important to look at. And then by neighborhoods, you can see that 22 of 22 neighborhoods listed, only 18 have capital projects with funds requested this year. Highest spenders by neighborhoods for FY24, Dorchester, then Roxbury, Rosendale, then South Boston, then North End. And then again, sorry, I think this slide first, being the highest, right, Karishma? And so the highest spenders, sorry, if we go backwards, downtown government center, here you can see 313 million and on, Dorchester, then Roxbury, Chinatown, South Boston, then Charlestown. Citywide funding, then there are different projects that are considered citywide, and the total there, as you can see here, 921 million point more. And then multiple neighborhoods together, this would be projects that impact, again, across neighborhoods. And then total funding breakdown in the pie chart. As you can see here, Charlestown taking up 18.8%, and then next with Downtown Government Center, then Chinatown at 9.6%, then Dorchester at 8.5%, then Roxbury at 8.4%. And then this is the actual breakdown in millions here by neighborhood. So total project funding breakdown by neighborhood. You can start with the highest being Downtown Government Center, and so on and so forth. We're not going to go through all the numbers, but you have it here. And as I listed before, it's downtown, then Chinatown, and the other ones that I've listed. Sorry, Charlestown, downtown, then Chinatown. And then city funds by neighborhood again. And you can see sort of visually where it lands. And this is like authorization FY23 in comparison to total. And then again, breaking down the funds by neighborhood. All right. Then you have funding by district, and the numbers at the bottom are the districts, District 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. District 1 is Councilor Coletta represents District 1, Councilor Flynn represents District 2, Councilor Baker, District 3, Councilor Worrell, District 4, Councilor Lara, District 5. Arroyo, District 5, Councilor Lara, District 6, Councilor Anderson, District 7, Councilor Bach, District 8, Councilor Braden, District 9. Thank you. Thank you for the correction, sorry. Oh, and the at-large councilors, Councilor Mejia wanted me to emphasize that at-large councilors are for.
We don't have a district.
Thank you. And then funding by district, dollars per person. And as you can see here, District 1, in terms of dollars per person, in terms of city funds, and also the breakdown for total project. So, for example, District 1 in city funds, 15 million, and then you see total project 38 million. And then same for the other districts. So, and then of course, we have questions and there are reasons behind this, so please, have your comments or questions ready for the conversation. All right. Thank you. As promised, we will move straight to public testimony. We came to you. This is a conversation for you, obviously for us as well. I hope to be able to not rush us through this conversation. If you've signed up, I have a list of people who signed up. Please prepare yourselves to come up. If there's another list, it's coming my way. For now, first I have Melissa Zander.
Good evening. I'll really try to make this as brief as possible.
Ms. Zander, I'm going to ask that you've been so patient. I ask you for the public to remain quiet because it's a small room with great acoustics in here. When you come to the podium, please identify yourself, your name, your affiliation, residence, where you live, and please take up to 2 minutes, and I will time you, and if you need a little bit more, we'll try to be flexible.
Okay, thank you. My name is Melissa. I'm not affiliated with anyone. I was conceived in Roxbury. I'll tell that story sometime. I'm registered in District 7. And I'd like to thank Councilor Fernandez-Anderson for holding this public hearing in a place that is both a landmark in Roxbury and MBTA accessible. Several line items in docket number 0767 seem to ostensibly address a number of things I've advocated for via public testimony. Specifically, line item number 6, the Clattery Pool, line items 39 and 40, fire equipment, line items 47, Long Island facility preservation. This is me giving this council credit. Line items 18 and 19, Madison Park Vocational High School, and the soon-to-be renamed Mel King Academy, formerly known as the McKinley Southern Academy, my alma mater. And also on docket number 0768, I believe the Madison Park and Mel King Academy were included in there. So it might come as a surprise that after closely reading and rereading the dockets pertaining to this meeting, I'm advocating for direct cash payments for low-income households in Boston. If this idea seems familiar, it would be helpful to recall that in the 2021 Boston mayoral election, there was only one candidate who was on record in their support of a universal income basic Universal Basic Income pilot program in Boston. It wasn't candidate or former acting mayor Kim Janey. It wasn't then candidate and current mayor Michelle Wu. It was not candidate Nisa Sabi George. It was not candidate John Barros. It was not candidate John Santiago. The only candidate who was perhaps the most genuinely and substantially impacted by poverty and other social determinants of health or lack thereof, Andrea Campbell, who's currently the Attorney General of Massachusetts. But all politics is local, as the saying goes, so let me bring this meeting back to the matter at hand and talk about a study from Canada in 2020. Recipients gave 50 homeless people a lump sum of 7,500 Canadian dollars, so about 5,700 US dollars. They were able to find stable housing, access food they needed, spent the money on food, clothing, and rent, and 39% decrease in spending for alcohol, cigarettes, and drugs. I took all the really mean stuff out of my testimony, but basically I wanted to just emphasize that capital investments in universal basic income would leave us with discretionary income that might let us, purchase municipal bonds. I can provide the Madam Chair with the link to the study in a news article, but basically we have to look at how we're going to support this economy. I feel like Boston's broke. I know I am. And I think just even looking at some of the line items and seeing that so little spent on housing, we need a universal basic income pilot program here. I feel a little bit like asking daddy for an allowance, but I hope the councilors keep that in mind, that you got to spend money to make money. And it would do a lot. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ander. Next, we have T. Michael.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. I'm a person of the trades, and sitting here listening how the mayor's committee talked about all the construction work. Not one program or one entity is geared towards the street violence. Black and brown kids going in and out of jail, coming out with no opportunities. I'm a product of the union, and the union is the most racist entity in the city of Boston. Let's be real. The only jobs that push towards black and brown kids on a construction site is wearing a hard hat with a safety vest, pushing a broom. The real paying jobs is in a skilled trade. The trade that we teach at the People's Academy, it's the most needed trade globally, which is the construction. It comes under sheet metal. And I'm watching everything is being funded except for the People's Academy that is designed and created to get black and brown kids off the streets, teaching them a trade. There's no funding in the budget. We've been around for over 15 years. I've spent out of pocket over $500,000 out of my own pocket. I've been paying property taxes for over 25 years. How many people in this room right now has been paying property taxes in Boston over 25 years? I have. A handful. And my tax dollars is not being reciprocated back to my program that's geared and designed to hire black and brown kids, to get them off the street so that they can make a sustainable wage. Thoughts and prayers is out the window. Tell the mayor, do like every other mayor before her, sit and talk with the people. Meeting the administration is useless. Let's be real. When it's time for election, she comes out in the community. She got into office, diversity, inclusiveness. The linkage money, T. Michael himself was part of the Millennium Project. The city gained over $100 million. $28 million is going into Franklin Park. But yet still the program that he created, the People's Academy, hasn't gotten one dime. How do you explain that? The mayor has the full discretion on the linkage money. Could do whatever she wants. Think about the big dig, and from then and now, look around the city, look at all the cranes. All that linkage money, where is that money?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Diane Wilkerson.
Good evening, everyone.
Welcome, Senator. Thank you.
I promise you I'm going to be in the time frame. My name is Diane Wilkerson, a resident of Roxbury, District 7, and I really have just, I said 2 messages, and really it's a process question. One of the things that is clear is that since COVID, we have had a very difficult time kind of getting back to normalcy, and normalcy for this community is being able to sit in meetings with our government. Most of the cabinets are still on virtual meetings, so we don't get to see and talk to them in person. And I think as a result, we clearly have lost something. Part of the process is that the budget itself gets put together by talking to people and working with people, but we really haven't been in the same space to have those conversations. And as a result, I'm going to just give you 2 examples. We talked about the pedestrian ramps, the orange, we call them the orange corners. I have so many pictures. I take pictures all the time up and down Blue Hill Avenue. On any given day, you might see 22. Actually, one day I counted from the Mattapan Square to my home, 22 orange corners. I saw 1 black person working on those teams. 22. I have been, and I'm not very many, but I'm going to say at least 15 or 20 meetings on Blue Hill Avenue. I have yet to find a resident in this strip who supports putting a train, a rail down the middle, a bus lane down the middle of Blue Hill Avenue. But somehow I have a sneaking suspicion that we just keep counting heads, and the number of people who show up on the Zoom will be reflected as support. No one supports it. You don't take a bus to pick up pizza. You don't take a bus to pick up your children. Our main streets are where people live. It's not like downtown where you would be going destination. And so my question, Councilor, and to Cabinet is, how do we measure that real voice? I'm optimistic. I think about what's going to happen in energy transition and an opportunity that we have to achieve what we never did in the Big Dig. We could literally redesign the lives of the majority of people in this community by targeting intentionally opportunities for people in this process. And that's really all I ask, that we figure out a way to do that, because it can work, but it has to be intentional. Thank you, my counselor. By the way, I didn't say I live in Roxbury, District 7. Thank to my counselor for this opportunity. We got to do this different, and we got to do this better. Thank you.
Thank you. Happy to add your questions to my line of questions. We're going to keep going for the sake of respecting people's time. So far I have 1 question from Senator Wilkinson. Next we have Dwayne Watts.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Dwayne Watts. I'm the Executive Director of the Neighborhood Network Center in Dorchester. I've worked for public facilities. I've worked for Department of Neighborhood Development. I've worked for the Boston Home Center. I've worked for the City of Cambridge, Urban Edge, Madison Park Development Corporation, Neighborhood Housing Services of the South Shore as a first-time home buying trainer, and a marketing agent for affordable homeownership units throughout the city. I've got two comments. One is the current housing policy that the mayor is pushing specifically on the residents of Roxbury isn't fair. I'll say it like that. The issue that I have with the policy is that there isn't enough being done to keep folks from being displaced from Roxbury. I haven't heard anything about anti-displacement. Folks from Roxbury being displaced all over the place. We have a very unique system or set of circumstances in Roxbury. The housing that you're building in Roxbury, the homeownership options that you're building in Roxbury aren't accessible to the folks that live in Roxbury. That's the easiest way to say it. It can be documented. We can have conversations about it. I'd rather call people in before I call people out. So I just want to put folks on notice from both sides that
folks in Roxbury being displaced. The second issue that I have is that I haven't heard anything about capital investment into Nubian Square. Nubian Square has been the same since the train lines have come down. At one point in time, when I took a break from being a first-time home-buying trainer, I drove a cab. I've been to every part of the city. At one point in time, the only restaurant in the Seaport district was Anthony Piers 4. It's not like that anymore. You go down to the Fenway. It's like heaven down in Fenway. There needs to be more investment into Roxbury. There needs to be more investment into Nubian Square. And there needs to be less affordable rental housing in Roxbury. There needs to be more homeownership options in Roxbury. And again, I'm willing to have any conversation, give you any data. The BPDA puts out information, so we know that you know the information. So I would argue that we're not being displaced. I would argue that we're being replaced. So that's my opinion. We're at a point where it can be documented that this is a fair housing issue. And again, I'd like to call people in before I call people out. All right? Thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Watts. Samuel Pierce.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the City Council, my counselor, Councilor Royal, members of the administration, members of the public, Pastor, for having us here at 12th Baptist. I'm just going to start by saying I'm actually very concerned because I don't see really any investment in the community colleges that could also benefit transit housing. And so one of the things that we talked about at some of our previous meetings is that there are some libraries that actually have been given housing. I'd like to see some ideas of what it would take to potentially add housing to the library in Nubian Square, which we're hoping to rename to Nubian Library. I'd also like to see us hopefully invest in 2 dormitories at Roxbury Community College. Currently there is parcel 3, which originally was going to be given to the NCAA Museum and now is up for debate. We also have several parcels in and around Roxbury that usually go to CDCs. And instead of giving everything away to CDCs, we'd like to ideally have these dormitories, because the idea is if we could put 5,000 units of transit housing at Roxbury Community College, it's right next to the Roxbury Crossing train station. We have elderly housing that they just recently built there. We have federal dollars coming in. Then we are very optimistic that we would be able to solve not only some of the displacement problem, but we could also bring economic benefit to Nubian Square by making sure that people who were engaged in education and employment frequented the area. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Pierce. Next, we have James Mackey. Bridget Wallace.
Good afternoon. Name is Bridget Wallace. I am a longtime Boston resident. Sorry, I'm congested. I don't have COVID though. I am an urban planner, social entrepreneur, been an advocate in Roxbury for over 20 plus years. Part of the Roxbury Strategic Master Plan when it was just in its inception. So I've seen the neighborhood change. I am concerned that we don't have race explicit language in the budget that really targets the issues that many Black and brown communities across the city have faced. I mean, they've been able to build a new neighborhood in the Seaport, and it's been intentional, right? And it is a live, work, play community there. And we have been asking for that for years. and have not been able to get that. People have advocated in this neighborhood for years and have not been able to get that. So that's one thing. And then in the budget, all of these things will dwindle down to a contract and procurement. Who's going to get that money? Who's going to get those dollars when those contracts go out? It's not going to be us, because we don't see it. As the senator noted, that she saw one person of color in counting 22 blocks. So that is problematic to me, that we continue to have the same conversations and we're not changing. Second, and thirdly, around the transportation piece. Again, that is an issue that's happening on Blue Hill Ave. No one wants a middle bus lane. Nobody. Who are you listening to? You talk about a public health issue, because now if you're looking to put 2 lanes into 1, then you're talking about congestion, you're talking about asthma rates going up, you're talking about cars being backed up, not to mention just people just get upset because these crazy lanes you've created where 2 go into 1, it goes back out to 2, people are cursing and carrying on at each other, and your blood pressure is going up because they've created these crazy traffic lanes. So those things are to be considered. I shop on Blue Hill Avenue. I go to Cafe Juice Up. I talk to the owner of Cafe Juice Up, which is a very popular establishment. She says, nobody's come to talk to me. And I don't want them to change the configuration of the street here because it will impact my business. So these are the things that are concerning regarding the budget, regarding who's being listened to, and regarding the value statement that's attached to the budget. Why aren't you listening to the people who live here, who've worked here, who've sacrificed for years here, and we cannot be a part of the renaissance of our neighborhoods? It's problematic, and that is the message that should be carried back to the administration. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wallace. Ms. Connie Forbes.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for being here. Hi. Thank you for showing up. Sometimes we don't expect that in this community. I'm a pretty simple person. I have 2 standards in my life that I pretty much, when I decide what happens with money, is want.
Put the microphone.
Oh, sorry. There's 2 standards I have with money. It's want and need. And I was surprised that $60 million went to a swimming pool, which I think of as being perhaps maybe not as much of a need as I would see in our community, which is lacking in a lot of areas. I know that I'll use the Burke High School as an example. They were built a brand new building and they have no HVAC, so they can't have basketball games. Brand new building, and no one fixed it. And how old is that building, the Burke's redesigned? I don't know if anyone knows off the top of their head. The Burke also has a kitchen, which in an area that has issues with food management and food accessibility, teaching our kids how to cook in a kitchen would be very valuable. But no one has even spent the time or the money to fix what already is existing. And so from my perspective, when I hear you talking about something that's, I would consider a luxury, I think that we should really re-examine our priorities. There are things that our schools do not have that are fundamental that no one has even cared to provide to our kids. And what message are they seeing? Oh, a swimming pool, or I'm not sure if it's a pool only, $60 million, but can't fix an HVAC so our kids can go into their own school and play basketball. Before you start making these budget decisions, perhaps looking at categorizing as a want and a need. And maybe the squeaky wheel does get the oil and get the money, but honestly, in this community, we've given up that the city of Boston's listening. We don't believe and trust that you are paying attention to what we're saying, and people take it upon themselves to make decisions for us, not with us. And that's been a problem forever. So I'm glad that we were able to convene here in 12th Baptist. It's the community's trying to show up and trying to speak, but the result of what you're hearing and what happens after we've spoken is going to tell us if you're sincerely interested in hearing and addressing our needs. And when we get to wants, that's another story, because I don't see that happening as of now, and not in my generation or my kids' generation. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Forbes. Louis Elisa.
Good evening.
Evening.
My name is Louis Elisa. I live at 68 Seaver Street in Roxbury. I'm a member and representative of Garrison Trotter Neighborhood Association. I'm also part of D7. I'm also part of the Masons and Deacon of People's Baptist. I just stay involved. Friends of Madison, and I'm here to say first thank you to my counselor as chair of the committee and to the other counselors for showing up, to President Flynn and the others, and to the cabinet members who've come out, because it's important that you hear and see that the community is concerned and committed to understanding what's going on in our community. While I appreciated the data disaggregated, broken down in terms of the budget, it basically said what we're trying to do now, but what it didn't show is what we've done in the past. A diagram that breaks down how the money for the city has been spent over the past 10 years would show a very stark difference now, because we have a person who's on the budget committee and we had no one on the budget committee. The difference would be the disparity between what has been spent in Roxbury and D7 and what has been spent for the balance of the city. I'm hopeful that this process that we're engaged now will not end, that will continue to grow, and that you will look carefully at how money is being distributed throughout the city. Wants and needs is a very good category. High schools and other areas in the community are a very good category. The question that's been raised is how and where the money gets spent. For our parks in Roxbury, we've been very challenged. The contracts that come in do not go to black and brown contractors. The work that's being done in our schools do not go to black and brown contractors. Without that opportunity and support, if we have a budget and if we put money in the community and it doesn't get spent for people who live in the community, we do not get the upward mobility we're trying to seek. We're asking for access to opportunity. We're asking that the money that comes in on this budget looks at the historical past. If we just look at what has been spent in the balance of Boston over the last 10 years, you would know that what we're now getting, because we have a very diligent city councilor, does not make up for the past problems that we've had. So I ask everyone to look carefully at this budget, what they say to their managers and the leaders within their departments about how equity has to be a part of the lens that they look through in terms of making Boston a livable city for everyone. I ask that you constantly look at how we spend our money, who we spend our money with, and what we say. I won't get into the budget issue or the equity issue in terms of contractors specifically, but I urge you as managers to take that in consideration. We have, for the first time in a long time, a representative who raises the question. But up to now, nobody's ever said, what is the equity in the spending in the Roxbury and D7 for the rest of the city? Now that we have that lens, please use that to look through it to see how we can make impact on the city as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lisa. I thank you for your patience. I just, for the sake of time, I'm going to just ask some questions about not my own, but from what came from the public testimony. If you haven't testified, we'll do a second round. Please sign up with the Shane up front. In terms of meetings, what I heard is that the community is saying that the administration or the mayor is not accessible, and so who has the influence, or who can influence in terms of community meetings or to influence decisions in community meetings? How can we actually measure who has influence in these meetings? Anyone can take that.
I mean, I guess I'll just lean in and sort of name what I think is also attention. I do believe that the quality of meetings when you're in person can be different. Here's where we're having some challenges, that the number of people that attend across all neighborhoods has gone up since we've started doing virtual. And so it does at times feel like there is some tension between quantity and quality. Because, for instance, if we have a meeting and people have kids at home, they can still have their kids there, and we don't have to have, a situation where they have to bring the kids to the meeting and then we have to find this, so I think that is a real tension. And I'll say, and this is something I'm saying as a pastor, hybrid really doesn't work very well. I find that with hybrid, either the people in the room or the people on the screen get prioritized. I have not yet seen hybrid that works as I would want. So I'm throwing that back out, but I just wanted to keep it real, because our team last year in the fall had a pretty intense conversation across a number of the cabinets, parks, but also historic preservation, about if we went back into in person, would we see the same number of people have come to our meetings who never used to come to them before? Would we lose all those people? Would they come to be in person? What should we do? And so I do want to note, I actually agree with what Senator Wilkinson was saying. There is a trade-off. So I don't know if people have suggestions about how we do that. I think we've now erred on the side of staying virtual to kind of try to keep people engaged. But I do agree, you don't get as much of the dynamic interaction that you sometimes can get in person.
Thank you, Chief. The comment about construction sites and the access to contracts or jobs, that will be handled in procurement hearing. Happy to get back to you and publish that, send you an email as well. And then the questions about anti-displacement or replacement, as the Brother Watts mentioned, and no accessibility to homeownership in Roxbury, also through housing hearing. The question, and I think Chief Dillon apologized for her absence and she was not able to attend. Council Lara has also sent a formal apology for not being able to attend due to childcare difficulties. And then where is the capital investment in Nubian Square? Chief or Jim?
In terms of recent, I think the reopening of the French Library, which was talked about renaming, is an example of recent capital investment adjacent to Nubian Square. In terms of
No, there's no conversation between the floor.
Just trying to get clear.
Oh, sorry, I didn't even see was the imam speaking, but there's no conversation between the floor and the panel. Sorry.
In terms of some of the raised grants, I don't know, Yashi, if that's intersecting with Nubian Square.
Yeah, so the Roxbury Resilient Corridors raised grant that we received will be roughly $20 million of federal funding that will allow us to rebuild and redesign parts of Malcolm X, Warren, and Melnia Cass. That will also likely be supplemented with additional matching city funds. There are a couple of other projects from the streets perspective that are underway in the Nubian Square area. We just completed, there's a few minor cleanup details to do, but a reconstruction of Ruggles Street, running from Tremont all the way to Washington in Nubian Square, that creates a much safer, more comfortable corridor, connecting corridor to the Ruggles train station from Nubian. We have recently completed one phase of construction work in Nubian Square proper. There's some work done in the area around the library that reconstructed sidewalks, added a bike link, added some safety improvements and some signal improvements there. And there's a second phase of that that is currently in planning.
Thank you. The concern?
Can I add to that?
Yes, of course.
Because I think also embedded in that particular question was with the reference to comparison to the Fenway Park, Fenway area. There's also that the development in that neighborhood has largely been private development that has been leveraged and incentivized by city planning through the BPDA. I think there are also similar efforts being undertaken in Nubian Square. And just from a city standpoint, we're also making additional investments, not directly in Nubian Square, but nearby Madison Park, for example, is a significant investment that's going to grow in the coming years in that facility, and also the Timothy. There's more to come from the city standpoint, but also we hear loud and clear around leveraging to make sure private investment as well as our investments in streets and parks in Nubian Square is there.
Thank you. I think the idea is to create that holistic, ecosystem of housing, play, and economic mobility, as Ms. Wallace mentioned. Yes, some of these funds are private, but I guess the question is there is a lot more investment in affluent communities than there is in Nubian Square or places like Nubian Square. And so is it that it will take the community to properly be integrated or financially somehow have some influence in order for us to advocate and be heard? And so I think the community is saying that basically that we are not heard, have not historically been heard, and still, transportation is wonderful, and we appreciate the work and the thought behind transportation. What the residual from that, the feeling from that is that people will fix Black neighborhoods in order to create the way for affluent communities to get to their jobs. So on the backs of Black people, they will get to their jobs and make their money. Now Black communities will get fixed. Now Black communities will get roads. Now Black communities will get bike lanes, because now this affluent community is coming in, gentrifying, and needing to get to their job. Because they need to get to their job and make their money, then Black communities will get roads, but Black communities will not get fixed. Black communities will not get economic mobility. Black communities will not get home ownership access. And that, I think, is what I keep hearing from District 7 over and over and over. And to have a list from the community and from myself to go through this list and pass it on, and I will read it on record today, everything that I've asked administration to give to Roxbury, everything that I've asked this administration, the mayor directly, to give to District 7, and everything that will happen and everything that will not happen. It's still a negotiation. I'm quite sure that this is a process with the amendment, with looking at the capital. It's just a proposal. Maybe you guys will be open to looking at doing less in Charlestown, less in Chinatown, less in downtown, and saying, look, some of these ARPA monies, most of the ARPA money was supposed to go for those who were impacted, most impacted. That means that if 70% of Black people were impacted, 70% of that ARPA money was supposed to go to Black people. But in this case, downtown is getting revitalized with ARPA money. And so we have to reevaluate what are we looking at when we're talking about equity. If we're going to define equity, let's be very clear that it is for racial equity, because the most disenfranchised are the poor of socioeconomic class, Black and brown people. I will stop there, but there are other questions in terms of investments in colleges. I think that is a question for, again, for another hearing. And then so in terms of, there was a question about want and need. Ms. Forbes mentioned that there is in order for us to understand, and I don't think Black people in the city gets to want anything. I think we need it, and we cry and we beg for it, and it's not you today here responsible for this. So I want to make very clear that individuals are here working hard to execute their job. And the conversation, though, has to be honest and transparent. So I apologize that it's a hard one, but I ask you for your patience while we delve into this and really look into this honestly. We don't get to want anything, but when we need, we ask for it. And we need more in Roxbury. Roxbury has no theater, no jazz anything, no arts and entertainment so far, and I know it's coming to Nubian in a few years. We have no anything for children with disability. We have no recreational, like actual holistic recreational anything for seniors. We have no playground, like actual game parks for adult youth. I'm not talking about playgrounds. And then when we look at parks and we compare across the city, Back Bay gets $18 million parks. We get $2 million parks. And we have to ask for the difference. Why is it that when I'm proposing a park like one in Back Bay, we can't get that? So that is the sentiment here. And I guess my question to you is, and I'll stop after this question because I'm taking up a lot of time, what is the needs assessment? How do you figure out who needs an $18 million park and who needs a 1.2 Dudley Town Common? Dudley Town Common investment is $1.2 million. There's a park in Back Bay that's $18 million. Who makes the determination of who needs more and who needs less? And how do you come to that decision?
Yeah, so I can speak specifically to that. So I think there's a couple things. One, I'll be real, I think Dudley Town Common is significantly smaller, so that's a part of why there's not totally enough foot space, right? We couldn't add a field, for instance, or like, so that's one piece. But I will say that the main reason that Copley is so expensive is that it is in a historic district, and therefore there are direct prescriptions about what kind of materials are allowed to be used in that park and not used in the park. So it's not actually really that there's a lot of great features going on in there per se. I'm not knocking it. I'm just saying the bulk of the money is in the cost of the paving. We can't pave it with asphalt. We have to use very specific. There's very specific historical designations about what kind of materials can be used and not used.
Historic preservation is important. It preserves history, it preserves identity, preserves culture. That's important. We want that for that community. We want the same for Roxbury. For example, if you're going to sack this city, this town, Roxbury, and take up all the buildings, and there's a harm been done, you and I are on the same page, Chief. I know you know that there's atonement needs to be done in Roxbury. They took away the buildings, they robbed the land, they cleaned it out. Before our time, they cleaned it out. Now there's land all over Roxbury. Could we look at a land big enough that we can bring back some of that historic preservation that was once stolen from the people in Roxbury?
Yeah, I mean, I think we should have a conversation. I mean, I think what I will raise is that we finally designated last year our first historic district in Roxbury. It's Fort Hill and Highland Park, which honestly was proposed by people in the 1970s and finally got done last year. There's a lot of complexity to that. But I do think it's worthwhile. I think there are other parts of Roxbury that I think would have a strong case for being a historic district, and I'd be more than willing to sit down with folks and talk to them about what does it take to set up a historic district. I do oversee the Office of Historic Preservation. We already actually have a slideshow that we can bring up and sort of walks you through the process. But yeah, that is why Copley is so expensive, and I'm not knocking it. There are moments when I wish that for the amount of money that we were spending, we're getting sort of more. It also does get abused a lot. So I will say this, part of it is that people drive onto it and do a lot of things because it is a gathering place for people to have rallies. It means we have consistently had to replace things that got run over by trucks or chipped. And so we are also trying to put in materials prayerfully that will not get as damaged as quickly while still meeting the historic preservation requirements. But if folks are interested in another historic district in Roxbury, let's talk. I want to make a shout out for Dorchester that also has some of the most historic, it has the most historic homes of any place in the city and not a single historic district. So I grew up in Roxbury and I live in Dorchester now, so let's talk about how both of those are places where we should be really looking at how we protect those assets.
Thank you. Council Braden, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to everyone who's given testimony. The capital budget is always a little challenging from the point of view of how it's presented, like a new project to be scheduled, in design, study underway, in construction, project complete. And you know, I'm looking at, I got the list, I got the spreadsheet with all the projects, and you know, there's projects in the under the Alston Brighton District 9 heading that have been in the works for 7 years. Some of them, there's one project at Hobart Park was a play lot in design in financial year 19 and 20, and then it disappears. And what happened? You know, it's very hard. I think it's very hard for the members of the public to follow. We get very excited about new bicycle infrastructure on Cambridge Street, and then just because it's in the list as a capital project doesn't mean it's going to happen anytime soon. So it's really, we get excited and say, oh, that's great, and then it never happens. So Is there a way, I know other municipalities in the country have other ways to sort of track capital improvement program transparency, like San Diego has a program. Is there a way that we can actually improve that, have more transparency on a web page so that our neighbours, you see a project that's in your neighbourhood, you can follow it, like how's it going? One thing in this list of projects for Alston Brighton is, the locker rooms at Brighton High School. Well, I heard last week they were completed, so why are they still in the list, or why are we not checked off done? And then there's a project for the Family Justice Centre, and it's wonderful that it's in District 9, but that should be classified as a citywide asset, because everyone from across the city uses it. And why would it be tagged on to as put in District 9's bucket as an amenity in District 9? So then also, just looking at the list of investments, and I really do appreciate that we, it sort of seems maybe inappropriate for me to say, but District 9 is consistently at the bottom of the heap, and I know we have a lot of assets out there, but when it comes to things like our BCYF community centre is going to close next year. We've got one. We don't have where's the plan? Where was the forethought in anticipating that this building was being condemned? Like the Jackson Man Community Centre has been on the list for being knocked down for, close on a decade. Why was there not a plan to have a new community centre? I know we're working on it right now, but the horse is out of the barn at this point. And I also want to amplify, communities of colour. The needs in those communities are incredible. But the neighbourhood that I represent, we have communities of colour too, and they need access to parks and community facilities. And I really would love to have more transparency and more of understanding of how that process is going to work going forward, because I think we have some room for improvement there. Thank you.
I'm going to defer to budget on the big picture, but I will take responsibility because I think that I need to be real that Parks has a lot of things that have not moved. So as I mentioned, that there was a time when we used to get about $8 million, and we would move that between all of our different project managers. We have the same number of project managers now as we did when we got $8 million. And so what's happened is people have gone from having 8 to 10 projects where it's like, we're doing just the tot lot in this park, or we're doing just the field in this park, to having 12 to 15 projects, including things where we're redesigning this entire park. And so one of the things that is in the operating budget, and I know we're not really talking about that, but we said we can't get done the projects that we tell people we're going to do if we don't have more people to do them. And so we have asked, and in the current proposal, I know that it's all moving and so things will change, but in the current proposal, we have asked for 3 new, what we're calling senior project managers, and those will be people who will both oversee, because Kathy Baker-Clips, who is here, currently technically supervises everybody in her department. You cannot be a great supervisor to 12 people. And so we need to get down, it's one of our goals to have no supervisor oversee more than 4 people directly so they can be deeply invested in their growth and development. But those senior project managers would oversee our we're not calling them junior project managers, we just have project managers and senior project managers, but those senior project managers would both take on the big projects, like Moakley, like Malcolm X, like bigger projects where we're doing lots of different pieces, and then they would oversee some of the folks who are doing some of our smaller projects. So I do believe that bringing on more folks will mean that when we commit to a project, it doesn't mean sometime in the near future, but really sticks to more of that 1 to 2 years before it can get into the pipeline. I want to be honest, we're not going to get there like in 1 year because we do have a serious backlog. But you and many other counselors have impressed that upon us, and we're trying to answer that, and I think it will get better.
I do want to appreciate the incredible work that you folks have done. The Parks Department has been very engaged. Like, we have Smithfield over by Harvard, which is, you know, an incredible park. Unfortunately, it's not that accessible for a lot of the folks who live in our public housing and whatever. So, you know, I think it is a regional park. I went to talk to my constituents over there, and it was people from Waltham and Newton and God knows where. I didn't find anybody from the neighbourhood in Smith Park. And I also, you know, just really thinking about having a more transparent way to track what's happening and knowing where a project is, and having it be accessible for our constituents to see where we're at with all of these developments. Madam Chair, how am I doing for time?
Oh, couple more minutes.
Couple more minutes, wow. The other issue that we sometimes forget about in terms of our infrastructure, our capital expenditure, I'm really delighted to see there's a huge amount of money being invested in Do It and in our 311 system. But I'm really interested in making sure that, you know, we invest in those sort of enterprise software that we can track in real time what's happening on the ground, whether it be street crosswalks, trees, having a GIS system that works across all departments, so that we can all the different departments can work together, and that we have really good data analysis. That will help us really hone in on where the greatest need is. Because you look at the map of District 9 and you look at tree canopy and you say, oh, that looks pretty good. It's pretty good out in parts of Brighton, but if you're down in Alston Village and around Alston, there's no trees to be seen anywhere. So it is an incredible heat island problem. So, you know, even having GIS systems to support all of your decision making and all your departments would be really, really helpful. And it really would be a 21st century tool. I know it's been around for a while, but it's something that we should be really using to its maximum potential, so that we can make very intentional and targeted planning and implementation of improvements across the city, and to really hit, and I think that will help a lot with the equity question, because we'll really know where the problems are. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Braden. Did you want Jim or Chief Grafenberger to answer the question, overall, why is it that you always get the least in District 9?
Alston, yes, I'd love that answer. Alston Brighton, there's an undercount in the census, so I think our population is close to 78,000. We have the second largest district after neighbourhood after Dorchester, and we're at the bottom of, you know, in terms of capital investment, we're at the bottom, and it's just something that I get asked about a lot in my community, is why are we getting forgotten about? So I'm just advocating for my neighbourhood and my district. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jim or Ashley?
So I think one of the items that maybe we should collaborate on is that sort of 10-year look back, because I think that is, because so looking at investment, sometimes things come in and out of the plan. So even while we were talking about investments in Nubian Square, we forget a major investment of the bowling building that was specifically targeted to spur economic development in Roxbury. The brand new police school headquarters could have been sited in different places, but it was strategically targeted to be there. And there's been additional investments, but they're just not in the plan right now. The Dearborn STEM Academy, the new police station in Roxbury. So I think it's an excellent point. I forget who made it during the public testimony, but to have sort of that arc, you know, and maybe Alston Brighton is in that part of that phenomenon that maybe, you know, with some of the investments in, and I know your predecessor was very focused on the Faneuil Library. We had come off the Honan Alston, which was a new branch library, so to set the tone for some new libraries going forward, sort of set the model of not just renovating something in place, but like building it from the ground up. So I think that's a good idea to sort of look at how things have been invested over time.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Councilor Braden, was that satisfactory?
Yeah, I really do think it's in everybody's interest if we could track these capital projects. Because just because it's on the list doesn't mean it's going to happen anytime soon.
And we want to be sensitive to schedule concern. Everybody has, even if the budget office, we have that same, we interact with it, like, when is this happening? Because we, have the same, but we know there's a lot of work that goes on that you don't see in the ground. There's a lot, and some of it needs to happen, engaging with community, to listen to which the last thing you want to do is go down the road of putting a construction package together and people come out and say, that's not what we wanted at all.
So even on the other, this is more of a question, maybe a comment directed at BPS, but, we have a new replacement, the Jackson Man Community Centre is going to close, but the Jackson Man Elementary School is already closed, and we're looking at replacing it with a new 21st century elementary school. I think the youngest school in Brighton and Alston, the minute some were built in the 1930s. So, a transparent process and be more engaged with the community so that, we have some idea of what's happening. It's not really helpful for us to be called to a meeting and we present it, here we go, this is what we're going to do. The community would actually like to have more input in those decisions. And that's not directed at parks, because you're very engaged with us. But yes, Madam Chair, I think I've used my time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Braden. Before I forget, Ms. Griffin, we'd like to use the bowling center. When can we get that building? Who do I talk to? I tried to reserve the bowling building and we couldn't get it. What's up with that?
I can take that.
Oh, okay. What's up with that, Chief?
Yeah, no, that's not Ms. Griffin. I think there was a conflict for this particular date that wasn't available. But while I have the mic, can I also, I also want to add that the capital plan is a 5-year plan, as we all know, right? So, there are different phases to projects, and that affects how much money you see in the plan in a given year for a project. When a project first enters, it's a study, it's going to be a lot less in the budget for it. When it gets in construction, it's a different ballgame. So just across the city, you'll see different phases of projects and different monies allocated for those projects. In my opinion, and we'll have the numbers in the next year or so, when we get to like construction with Madison Park, it's going to be a significant project. And it shouldn't be looked at as we're investing more here than somewhere else. So, because it's going to happen all across the city. So I think that should be noted. Another thing I also want to address is that, we can do better, and we are going to try to do better to make sure people understand where things are in the capital plan, when you can expect to see something happen. But the reality is that we also are subject to emergency things, because as a city, we also need to do better in maintaining good, state of repairs and preventive maintenance, because sometimes we get projects like the Clarity Pool that was brought up earlier, where we had a desire to make sure the mayor actually insisted that every pool be available to the kids of the city, and we worked very hard. But we had pools like the Clarity that had about a decade of deferred maintenance. We could have maintained that pool and kept it going at a much lower cost. So now we've shifted to say, how do we also, on the operational side as well as the capital side, make sure that we're investing more in preventive maintenance to keep our assets in good working order, so we can plan and we can be more equitable, and stay on our capital plan as well as operationally make sure that these buildings, which, as was said earlier, are tools to provide services, can provide those services.
Thank you.
That's a long answer to the bowling question.
That was, well, we're probably going to be scheduling, we like to end on time. Sorry, Councilman here keeps feeding me M&Ms. We're probably going to be closing on time, so we'll probably schedule part 2, and we'll be talking to you about the bowling building. Thank you. What's on time? 8. Oh, on time is 8:30.
Oh, 8:30, okay.
Councilor President Flynn, you have the floor.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So my two questions/comments. Just wanted to follow up on Chief Irish, who I have great respect for, but you mentioned we have a lot of maintenance that has been deferred, and I agree with you. And a lot of maintenance that should have taken, and we need preventive maintenance as well. So I guess my question is, as it relates to the school department, and one of the neighbors brought it up, the HVAC system. We have old school buildings here in Boston. We're also building several new schools as well. Are we guaranteeing for the start of September? I've asked this question. I never get an accurate answer at times. Are we guaranteeing that all HVAC systems will be operational for this coming September? Every school building throughout the BPS system, no excuses. Is that going to get done? We have the money, we have the resources, we got a lot of federal money. Is that going to get done so kids can study and teachers can teach in a healthy environment?
So, I'll take
And Sam, you know, that's something I've been focused on for the longest time. And I want a straight answer on that, because oftentimes I don't get a straight answer from the BPS team. But that's critical. That's critical that we do that. No more excuses.
So I'll answer your question briefly, and Brian Ford, my Executive Director of Facilities Management, will elaborate on it. But we do have HVAC systems that are working and operable. Our goal is always to make sure that they are working. But at times, as you know, things break down and we have to repair them. So our goal is always to have HVAC systems working. And we have been making a lot of investments in other window units and other ways that we have our buildings' ventilation system properly working. So with that, I'll turn it over to
No, I'm gonna finish. But how are we not investing resources, money into the BPS system to deal with HVAC system?
We are, sir. We are, sir, and we'll elaborate in a second.
So you're guaranteeing to me that we're going to have no issues at the start of the school year next year?
What I'm telling you is that we'll make sure our systems are working operably as much as we can, and if they break down and have to do repairs, we will do that.
That's a yes?
Yeah. So, good evening, everybody. My name is Brian Ford. I'm the Executive Director of the Facilities Department for Boston Public Schools. And Councilor Flynn, to address your question on the HVAC systems that we currently have in the schools, all of those will be functioning. We continue to repair them as they are operable. The problem we have right now is not all of our schools have HVAC, and that is an issue that we are working to fix. We have $10 million in this capital project, in this capital budget to work on that as well, and our team has already started assessing buildings to make sure that they're able to provide the thermal comfort and ventilation rates that we need across the district. We are working to apply window ACs where applicable for steam heating systems. We provide air purifiers and fans to make sure that there's the proper ventilation rates across the schools, and we're continuing to expand upon that as we can with both grants, city money, and district money.
Thank you. So here's my point. I guess let me be more clear on my point. Is this September, there should be no excuse at all that every child should be learning and every teacher should be teaching in a healthy environment with the HVAC system that is effectively working 100%. And if that doesn't happen in September, I would consider that a failure. Well, this is an issue that has been plaguing BPS. It's not you, sir. It's not Sam. It's been plaguing the system for a long period of time, and I think residents and BPS families want assurances that since we have this federal money, that it's not going to happen again.
Yeah, so I appreciate that, Councilor Finn, and we do share that sentiment with you, and we appreciate your advocacy as well.
Please speak into the mic, sorry, so the camera can pick it up.
Thank you, Councilor Finn, for raising that, and we do agree with those sentiments, and we do endeavor to work and make sure that all of our kids and staff are all safe in the buildings with our environmental and HVAC systems and air quality in general. What COVID has taught us as a district is we really look really carefully for best practices around air ventilation and air quality, and we've gone above and beyond. We've been nationally recognized for the work that we're doing with our air quality monitoring and sensoring and HVAC system. So we'll continue to work closely with all of our schools, our union partners, and your office and others here in the community to make sure that the systems are working, and whether or not, we'll have to make investments to make sure that they are.
Thank you. And my final, Madam Chair, do I have another opportunity to ask one more question?
You do, sir.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. And again, thank you to you, Madam Chair, for bringing us together on this important meeting. So my final question, maybe it's to the Parks Department. The Crite Park, Rohan Crite Park in the south end, it's actually literally on the border of Roxbury in the south end, between my district and Tanya Fernandez Anderson's district, I should say, on Columbus Avenue. Can you give us an update on the park? I know we've made some progress on it, but where do we stand right now on Rohan Crite Park?
Sure, Councilor. Currently, it is a public works project because it is on their land. Once phase 1 is done, it's being transferred to the Parks Department, who will then take on phase 2. So, Yash, unless you know more, last I heard it was starting construction this fall, September, going on. A lot of community advocacy around it. And once that is completed throughout the fall and the winter, in the spring, it'll turn over to the Boston Parks Department to be an official park, which will then be Article 97 protected in perpetuity, and then we'll do phase 2 work on that park.
Thank you, Ryan. That's good information. That's an issue I've been working on for a long period of time. Rohan Crite, for anyone that know him, he's deceased, but his wife is still alive. A wonderful artist, famous artist right here in Roxbury in the South End, but across the country really, and has wonderful paintings. But working with the residents in the South End, myself and Councilor Tanya Fernandez Anderson, there was a little area on Columbus Avenue near Charlie's that they're going to have a park there. So it'd be welcoming to everybody, and looking forward to getting the resources, looking forward to someday opening that park soon. So I want to say thank you to Commissioner Woods and the Public Works team that really worked hard on it. So I want to say thank you to you, Ryan. Madam Chair, I have no further questions.
Thank you. Chief Franklin Hodge, did you have a comment?
I just wanted to piggyback on the comments regarding Crite Park. So it is moving forward into that first phase of development there. I just want to be a little bit cautious about the timing. We are hoping to advertise and get it into construction this year. There are some issues that we are working through with the Parks Department about tree protection, because some of the features proposed in the design of that park may impact the root zones of some of the existing trees. So we are working through those design issues right now. We hope that we will be able to quickly resolve those and get it advertised, but depending upon the timing of that, it may end up being in next construction season before that begins work.
Yeah, I don't want to wait too long, though. I want this thing done.
We want it done too, but we also don't want to kill the trees that are there when we do it. So that's the thing we're trying to balance.
Council President Flynn?
I have no further questions. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Council President Flynn. Councilor Murphy, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the community first for coming out, and your questions and your comments were well heard and well taken. Thank you. A couple points and a couple questions. I first just want to thank Council President Flynn for advocating for BPS. We were in the operational budget hearing earlier, and most people know, if not all, and over 40% of our budget, operational budget, is to our Boston Public Schools. We have $1.7 billion if you're including the ESSER funding that has to be spent soon. And when you look at this chart here, 25% of our capital budget, over $1 billion. So we absolutely have the money. It's the value statement I talked about earlier. Are we making sure that we're putting, all of the people and, what we need to do to make sure this happens for our students, for our teachers, is important. So thank you for that, Council President Flynn. I also appreciate it came up a few times by different panelists, but also it is hard to pinpoint at any one time how much is being
invested in any one neighborhood. I live in Dorchester, but as an at-large city councilor, and I'm around the neighborhood, so I do appreciate that district councilors advocate and, stand up for their neighborhood so strongly, so thank you for that. But you do have to look back, so thank you, Jim, for that, 10 years, like, where were we? There was a couple years back in my neighborhood, we got the library done, but that was over 10 years in the budget and a lot of advocacy. And it was brought up, the Clarity Pool. I mean, that went into the budget over a decade ago and just kind of fell off. So there's lots of projects too that, unfortunately, and I think that's where the community, and we need to be more transparent with the neighborhoods, that just because you see it and it starts out as a study, you still need to see it through and advocate. And so making sure your district counselors or us, your at-large counselors, helping make sure, like, where is it this year? Where is it going? How did that study turn out? And making sure, and I know that you mentioned, Dion Irish, things happen and we have to fix things and emergencies happen, and the keeping up with the maintenance is so important that we're not waiting. And I do believe the Clarity Pool was one of those instances where we should have fixed it before. One question from that, not sure who could answer it, but of the 178 million in that section about BCYF community centers and pools, it seems as though 35 million is for the Clarity Pool, but is it 60 million that we have allocated in the capital budget for pools overall? Because we're going to take a look at others, making sure we're improving not just the Clarity Pool. Is that true?
Yeah, there's a pool repair. There is in the BCYF budget, there's a generic pool repairs budget to sort of get at Chief Irish's concerns about preventative maintenance and capital repairs. So we have, it's a $3.3 million budget for that purpose.
Okay.
So,
And there's also 2 million on the yes side.
I also want to add that for the BCYF, I know there'll be a BCYF hearing where we can get more into details on their specific projects,
Yep.
but on overall, some of the big projects that are listed there is a new community center in Grove Hall, and also one in the north end, so those two also are a big part of that number.
Okay.
I have worked with Chief Masso a little bit about it. You definitely should ask more on BCIF, but I know that the goal right now is actually to do a full assessment of every pool. For those of you who know Chief Masso, you know that he was the lifeguard at the Blackstone Community Center for many years, and so I know he is deeply invested in getting that pool also restored, but the point is to do actually a look across all the pools, understand what situation that they're in, where there might be opportunities to add pools, and where, and what it will take to rehab all of them, and also what it will take to maintain them, because some of the pools, they were just allowed to go so long that now we're going to have to replace them, when if we had done it differently, we could have probably been still maintaining them.
Yes, last year I sponsored the hearing with the BCYF pools so I'm glad to see that they're investing and looking at all of them. And also recently I had sponsored the community center pool, so I'm assuming that's where, because there's summer closures and that ties into the HVAC system, I hope, for many of the schools. I know that the Murphy School and the Leahy Hollow Inn and others are going to be closed this summer for repairs, so hopefully that all gets done in time. Just, do we know what the plan is? I see that we're listing West Roxbury High Educational Complex, what the plan is for that?
Yes, our commitment is to ensure that it remains a 712 high school. We committed that high school when we first closed the West Roxbury complex, and we're committed to doing that. Right now, we're still waiting for more information on our facilities condition assessments and our DLR study to help us design and shape what we do with that project and property. But we are committed to having a high school there.
Okay. And one last question. On page 11, it talks about the capital improvements, infrastructure, the entryway, main office, security cameras, and door alarms. Did this come out of the Council of Great Schools report that DESE required BPS to, that showed that we had a lot of security breaches, not just the front doors, but we had a lot of windows and doors that aren't secure?
Partly. So that's a combination of internal audits and security safety audit that we did with the schools, Commander Brian Shaw, as well as the Council of Great Cities Schools report, as well as recommendations from DESE, as well as our internal feedback that we got from school leaders. And Mr. Ford can elaborate as well.
Thank you.
Good evening again. Just to piggyback on exactly what Sam was saying, so a lot of what the CGCS report showed to us was where we can improve, right? Where we improve relationships, where we can improve different parts of our buildings. A lot of that had to do with where the main office might be located, where the entryway might be changed, how we provide security for the barriers that are those exterior doors, and working with our partners there. So that would be a main budget point for us there, making those improvements.
And do we have a timeline on that, do you know? For when we want those done?
I would say no, there's not a timeline on that, just to be frank. It's ongoing, and we have to look at them holistically as a district. Make sure we're applying our racial equity and planning tool, and that we put a good scope of work together as we do some of that. But the work is already in progress. Security cameras and door alarms are already moving across the district with what looks like a 3-year timeline.
No, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Murphy. Councilor Worrell, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you again to the public for showing up and lending your voice to this conversation. As a lifelong Dorchester resident, I always felt that my community was underinvested. And one of the first things that I did when I got into office was, to your point, Chief Irish, was take a look at the capital budget over an extended period of time. And I did that over a 5-year period. And I made mention to this last year, was that District 4 was the lowest amount over a 5-year period. It was the only district that did not surpass $200 million in the capital budget plan.
Sorry, excuse me a moment. I'm going to ask that folks in the audience, thank you.
It was the only district that did not surpass $200 million, where at that same time frame, there were districts that surpassed $1 billion. And I would love, Jim, if you can send over a 10-year breakdown. So I would love to kind of do the numbers to see what those disparities are. But with that said, in this capital budget, and I do want to thank the administration for making a lot of investments inside the district, because this year the district was allocated, I believe, over $200 million. So I do want to say thank you for that. However, in order to make sure that we're pushing for corrective action and continue the investments in our district, there are a few questions I have in terms of update on some projects. One of the parks, Walsh Park, we'd love to get an update on, see if we could push that study forward. And then also, excuse me, let's take a look at my note. Follow up on Mother's Rest. And then there's Erie and Ellington, where we're trying to get more lighting and more safety measures. And then Robert Playground, there were conversations on improving the parking over there.
I can send them to you, Council. I don't have all the updates in front of me, but happy to. Walsh Park update, Mother's Rest, Erie, Ellington, and Roberts.
Thank you. And then we have a few pools in the district that are currently not up and running. One of these pools is the Lee School pool, and I keep on hearing back and forth if it's a BCYF, if it's a BPS. Who's responsible for the maintenance and fixing and improvement of the pool? I just want to make sure we get that on record today.
Sure. So I can start, and then others feel free to jump in. So in our MOU with BCYF, they are operators, our pool operators, and we work in conjunction and collaboration on all pools across the district with them as that entity. So we do have monies allocated in the budget for FY24 for school-specific pools that we work collaboratively with BCYF, because they have the contracts, they know all the people to help set those up. So what we don't have right now internally in BPS is staff dedicated towards working on pools. We just never had that infrastructure and capability. That's why BCYF has historically been our pool operator. So we're in the process of continuing those conversations with BCYF, making sure that we're clear on how to go about fixing the pools, whether they're in schools or external pools, and if we have to offset dollars in different places, we're happy to do that. So I guess that's your answer.
All right. And can we look for the Lee School pool to be up and running this summer?
We have some coordination that we have going on with them, but we'll have to get back to you on specific timelines.
All right. And then Chief Irish, you was making mention to staffing levels for preventive measures. Are we at those staffing levels now? And if we're not, like, how many more full-time, part-time, how many more employees do we need to get to those preventive measures that we're not waiting until something's broken to fix it?
Yeah, I mean, to get to where we need to be, we're not going to get there in just one budget cycle. It'll take time to build capacity, but this particular operational budget represents a significant investment in property management, and they'll also be providing more support to BCYF. For example, BCYF has 35 facilities. They only had like 3 people whose job is it to do maintenance. So, as you can imagine, you can't do a lot of preventive work with that type of staffing. We've boosted up staffing either at BCYF or through the property management department to address those type of issues.
And then my last question is for streets. Everyone wants speed humps. But also, there's a few intersections inside of my district that there's a lot of advocacy around. I know the Bowdoin and Geneva intersection, that has been, advocated for many years, and the new advocacy is now around Talbot and Washington Street that also goes into Norfolk Street. It's kind of a crazy, windy intersection, and we'd love to get that on the timeline and on your radar, Chief Franken Hodge.
Yeah, thank you very much. Happy to look into both those intersections and see where we're at in terms of any planning projects around that. In terms of speed humps, we stay tuned. We have some announcements coming about how we intend to accelerate speed humps. I'll just say here, my goal is that we will have speed humps on every residential street in Boston that is, from an engineering perspective, qualified for speed humps, but it's going to take a while to get there. But we're putting in place a plan where we can make progressive annual investments that will get us closer to that goal, and we'll have more to say in the next few weeks about that.
Thank you, and I want to thank Brian. Brian and I took a walk around Up Holland, but I also sent over a list. We'd love to get will we see some of those improvements in this fiscal year? Yes. Awesome, love it. I love simple answers. That's all my questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Rowe. Councilor Bach, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. I'll say I'm very excited about the $204 million that's in this capital budget for the Boston Housing Authority, and looking forward to working on that on the other side of the fence. But I'm here tonight because I do still, for the rest of the week, represent District 8, and I just want to put a few things on the record and also express some thanks for the district, just because I know that I'm not going to be in a bunch of the department-specific budget hearings, so I just want to make sure that I'm amplifying the voices of the folks I represent, and I know I can count on my at-large colleagues and others to continue to ask questions and follow up. So since we're a little constrained for time, I'm probably mostly going to list things and sort of put them on Chief's radar. But first one is for BCYF, a big thank you. Really excited about finally getting gym in the AC in the Tobin gym. The Tobin Community Center, it's one of our premier basketball courts in the city. Our young people love it, and the fact that while the rest of the building's been air conditioned, the gym has not been air conditioned has been a big constraint. So I am incredibly excited that that project, which has been long awaited, is actually in as a new project this year. So thank you to Carrie and everyone. On streets, just a few things. One is Chief Franklin Hodge, I saw the additional line for converting the gas lamps to electric. We had a hearing last week with National Grid where we were talking about the many streets in Beacon Hill that they're tearing up right now for their gas infrastructure. And one of the things that they said was that we have not to date told them that we want to eliminate any of those hookups, and that if we did do the conversion to electricity, that they would require to dig back up the street because they're not going to leave the lines at the lamp. They're going to cut them to the main. So I just really wanted to flag that if we're going to do that at scale, we need to get that into them like ASAP on all the streets that are coming up in the hill, because we can't cut those streets twice. I mean, we're already 5 to 10 years behind on paving. I think that but I'm excited about that. I'm excited about some great Westland Ave street lighting work that's got happening. So want to really appreciate Mike Donahue for that. I'm sure that if Councilor Coletta were here, she would also ask about the North Washington Street Bridge and like where we are on a timeline with that. So just want to put that question on the record. This one, maybe if we have a second to get to it, great, but I think it would be great to understand the green infrastructure piece. It's such a citywide like portfolio need, and so the amount of money that's in the budget here is like obviously like an initial toehold. So like, how are we thinking about like what are we going to look at and how do we spin that out? Would be great for me and Councilor Flynn to get an update on how much longer the Dalton Street Bridge project is going to take. I was slightly concerned when I looked at the number of fiscal years that money was still divided up in the capital budget, so I would love to hear that that's a mistake. Blossom Street, the $2 million for the Blossom Street redo has been in the budget literally since the Menino administration. We got another $4 million from the MGH project to like finally do it up. One thing is I don't know why that 4 is not reflected in the budget. Like I think that number should say 6, but also I don't think we're anywhere on design or even maybe someone being assigned to that project yet. And that's really a problem in terms of coordinating with the ongoing like project at MGH, or I think I'm concerned about it. So just wanted to flag that. Also in the West End, Thoreau Path is this weird situation where it's a pedestrian path that is the park for the West End. It doesn't have another park area, and so it's a super important meeting place, and the desire there is to not just repave the path, but also repave the path and regrade it, because right now we have a lot of runoff that's like killing the mature trees around it, which are also a really key part of the gathering space. So just again, I think it's great to see that in the budget here. It got lumped with the Canal Street project, but they're actually 2 separate projects, and they were funded separately out of the BPDA process. So it would be great to have those distinguished. And I think whereas for the Canal Street project seems like more of a long-term thinking thing, the Thoreau Path project really should be like ASAP, and it's much more straightforward. So would love to see those things split. On the Mel King Academy side, just wanted to say, I think because of course we think of the South End when we think of Mel King, and the premier campus of that Mel King, formerly McKinley site, is in the South End. Folks forget that we have both the high school and middle school of that school are in the Fenway on St. Mary Street and Peterborough Street. I think we're really glad that the focus in that process, Sam, has first started with prioritizing that student community and thinking through what they need state of the art. But like, we do need to get to the point where you all come talk to the community and talk specifically about the 3 sites and what BPS's vision for all 3 is, because I think many of us think it doesn't really make sense to have the school split across 3 sites if we're rebuilding state-of-the-art facilities. There's a lot of interest in, is there an opportunity for housing above public assets like a school and housing play at the Fenway sites? So, could it be housing for teachers? All kind. I think the Fenway community is very eager for that conversation, but it has really wanted to be respectful of the school community's needs first. But it would be great for us to not just always be saying, oh, we're going to do more stuff with the Mel King schools. Like, it's 3 sites, and I think we got to be able to talk geographically. Psyched about the 311 investment. We really need it. It was really state of the art 15 years ago. So it's really exciting to see that into its capital. Just a flag that on the park side, the Kenmore block of the ComEv Mall, there isn't, like, we've been really actively involved in the study process for that. I know you know, Ryan, and we've been, I was really encouraged. We had a parks meeting in Kenmore Abbey with the low-income seniors. We had Chinese and Russian speakers. Those are the primary users of that park. And it's nice that even that process has come out with improving the crossing that they make to the park and making it safer for them. So I feel like we're in a really great process, but it worries me a little bit that we're stutter stepping in the sense that there's no next allocation for that this year. So just want to stress the importance of continuing to move that forward. Really excited about Back Bay Fence pathways, making that actually accessible as we get the Army Corps out. And just wanted to shout out Lauren Bryant, who my office feels has run the best department community engagement process that we've seen, period, related to that. So just really want to thank her. Excited about the Tool House, excited about accessibility. But now that we put all this money into the Shaw Memorial, the idea that we're going to make it actually ADA accessible. to get up there from the Common is huge. It'll be huge for so many of our constituents, and I think also will just be huge for people trying to traverse that part of the city, like the same way that I see so many people crossing by City Hall now because of the accessible path. So really excited about that. And the Clarendon Street Playground, and the $1 million in for, starting the kind of McKim master plan implementation. And, again, another thing that I know is a timing thing is like we're not putting a bunch more in this year's capital for the West End Library because of the sort of extensive disposition process we have to go through with doing the housing above public assets. So I'm like fine with that, with the caveat that when we actually have done all those things, we need to move aggressively and on that. It's a really exciting opportunity to have more housing and a new state-of-the-art library there. And then I hear my timer, so just my last note would be, because I feel like they get kind of left out in a lot of these conversations, and this is probably for you, Carrie, is that the archives, the Rivermore project has been theoretically funded for a long time. I keep going out there and the better storage is still not there, and we still have these kind of like, curling, really precious records of the city. And I just feel like even in that building, we prioritize the like new space for EMS, but I just don't feel like archives has seen the investment. And I know that with our like very beloved archivist, John McColgan, having retired, and I know that the city, will be looking to appoint somebody new there, but I just feel like they get a little bit forgotten. And they're stewarding really important history for the residents of Boston, history that we're all going to be drawing on as we come up to the city's 400th anniversary. And so I would love for us, when we talk about historic preservation, to not just talk about these exciting historic buildings. I'm thrilled there's our piece of the investment for the accessibility of the old State House project in here, but also thinking about how we treasure our historic records out of the archives. So thank you. Sorry for no questions, but just wanted to get all those things on the record, and thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Bach. Councilor Mejia, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, so, I just kind of want to start off with just acknowledging the fact that in 1968, MLK was assassinated. In 1968, Kevin White was elected to represent us as our mayor through 1984. Then Mayor Flynn from 1984 to 1993. Menino, 1993 to 2014. Walsh, 2014 to 2021. And now Wu, 2021 to present. And I think it is really challenging as someone who grew up here in the city of Boston to sit here and really think about how we meet this moment when we hear people who have come to testify and talked about feeling like their issues and the things that they need have not been prioritized in the current budget. It is not lost on me that as a council, we have a responsibility to work in collaboration with our constituents. And this is the point that I made earlier this morning, that the voices of the people, I feel as though, have either been lost, muted, or lost along the way, because there seems to be a disconnect with what we're hearing out in these streets and what we are being presented with in this budget. But I think that that's where the opportunity lies. If there has been decade after decade of disinvestments in communities of color, what possibilities do we have today when we have a cabinet that is more reflective of the diversity of the city, that we have a council that is reflective of the diversity of the city? Like, what opportunities, if any, is there for us to pause and say, let's look at the harm of disinvestments decade after decade, and pause and say, before we move any dollars forward, let's pause and prioritize and be thoughtful. And I just don't know if we have done that. And I'm curious, Ashley, because you're the chief here. I'm curious if you could just help us understand the process and the logic and the decision-making process, because you talked about community input, but I have not heard community feeling heard in the process. So could you just tell me what community did you all talk with and connect with to inform your priorities?
Sure, thanks for the question. So, you know, I think I should start by saying I really appreciate all of the comments that we've heard tonight, and I think the mayor in particular is really eager to partner with you and community on these issues. So I just want to make sure I thank everyone for that. You know, I don't think we think that we have the perfect process or that we've engaged everyone perfectly, and I hope we're not, you know, representing that. There's always opportunities to improve, and I think through our process, we're really trying to engage as many people as we can through as many different avenues as possible. We meet with the counselors and you and your colleagues to hear your priorities for the capital plan. We rely on our department heads and our cabinet chiefs who are on the ground doing the work to tell us where the needs are. We frankly hear from the mayor and her team. So there's a really robust set of engagement and voices that we're hearing from, but I think, you know, I don't think it's perfect, and I don't think we hear from everyone. There's always room to improve and opportunities to improve our process, but we really, you know, rely on people on the ground, yourself, our cabinet colleagues, to help us understand where the priorities are and help us with that decision making, in addition to all of the other factors that we're considering and weighing, you know, whether it's availability of project managers and Dion's team, or, you know, how much we can borrow this year because we've hit our debt limit. There are a lot of factors that go into it in addition to understanding what the priorities are within the community.
Thank you. So I'm just going to know, just for an experience, and this was in 2022 or 2021, I can't keep up with the dates, but all I know, it was the Blue Hill Ave Town Hall that our office hosted in regards to the center bus lane. And I remember then, in January of however many years ago that was, people stating specifically that they did not feel like they were being heard. People showed up to that town hall, they provided specific examples of the things that they wanted to see. We were told that those things were gonna happen. And for me, I feel like the will, it's about trust building, right? And I just don't know if we are at a place where we believe that what people are asking for, we're gonna deliver on that. And I know, Chief, I'm looking at you, Chief of Streets, because, you know, the fact of the matter is that Juice Up, you know, hearing the comment that Juice Up does not want this, and I specifically had asked about her being engaged in the process, and then we gave you 500 different things that y'all could do for community engagement, and I'm disheartened to hear that those things are not happening. So is it a matter of funding? Is it a matter of political will? Is it a matter of political interest? Like, you don't have to answer specifically to that, but I'm just giving that as an example of how people in the community show up to spaces and places, ask for certain things, and then what happens is we feel oftentimes that we get yes to death, and then you all go behind closed doors, and then something else happens. And that's not trust building. And the reason why I'm lifting that up as an example, and Sam, you know I'm coming for you too, because you know I got some issues with BPS. But I'm gonna wait for my hearings to come at you. But I'm switching up my fight, just so don't be too concerned. But I do think that I'm going to show up this particular budget cycle with assuming best intentions. So I'm going to be vulnerable and believe that you definitely have our best interest in mind, and that you're going to do everything in your power to show up in ways that community can believe in you. However, right, you all are gonna have to meet us halfway and show that you're vulnerable, speak the truth, in terms of when you don't know an answer, don't tell us what you think we want to hear. And sometimes you're just going to have to rip the Band-Aid off and tell us like it is. Because what happens is like an abusive relationship. So I think it's really important for us to seize this moment with the new administration and say we're going to change the way we do business. And I think that that's what I'm looking for. I'm more concerned about the process, because the process for me is far more important than the outcome. It's the how we get there. And if we're not getting there with community, then we're leaving the voices of the people behind. And then next year, I'm going to have the same conversations, and the only thing that's going to change potentially might be the characters who are giving me the same PowerPoint presentation, and the only thing that has changed is the date and maybe a few numbers here. But it just feels recycled. It doesn't feel like we're moving forward in some cases. And Sam, since you have the most experience with me, I'd like for you to tell me how we're going to do business differently this budget season.
When you prescribe, Counselor.
No, I'm not laughing. I'm serious.
I'm kidding with you, Counselor. I apologize, but I shouldn't take that too lightly. But in the last few years that we've done business together and worked together, I think we've learned as a district more so how we engage with the counselors in your office and try to be more willing and collaborative and partnering with everyone. I think on our end, anyway, we've done a better job this year at meeting folks individually, meeting folks at schools, and having conversations out in the field in the community about things that are concerning. So we'll continue to do that, and I think I hope to demonstrate in this year's budget some of what our conversations have been, and addressing some of your priorities.
So I'm an at-large counselor, and and I'm really happy to hear that my colleagues are getting a lot of things, and they're really excited about a lot of the investments that are happening in District 9. But it's really disheartening to sit here and listen to all of that when I know District 4, District 7, that's not the case for everybody. And I think that this is where the opportunity lies, is how we're going to move differently for districts that have been historically underserved, disinvested in. And so I think that that level of commitment is what I'm looking for, because it doesn't feel good to sit here and listen to all of the amazing things that are happening in other districts, while Dorchester, Roxbury, Mattapan, and other neighborhoods that have traditionally been disinvested in for the last 55 years. And yet, here we are still asking for our needs, not just our wants. And I think that that is very important for us to just kind of like ground ourselves in how we're going to show up differently. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Mejia. Councilor Braden, did you have a point of clarification for Councilor Mejia?
Oh, District 8, I'm sorry.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, sorry, I meant to say District 8, which is Councilor Bach's district. I went right after her, so I was still feeling traumatically like overwhelmed with all of the amazing things that District 8 just got while we're still trying to get something.
Councilor Bach, did you have a response?
Thank you, Councilor Anderson. Actually, I think District 8 is actually, as your chart showed, in one of the lower sides of this year's capital budget. And I think as we've been discussing, it's tricky in this conversation. I think it's really important for us to be thinking about geographic investments, but I also think it's really important, and I'd be interested, now that we've got our great budget analyst on board and your office, Madam Chair, is doing so much of this work, to really think about how we tag types of facilities in the city. Because, for instance, like in my district, the Tobin Gym, kids are coming from all over the city to use. I think about the Boston Arts Academy, which is what inflated the District 8 capital numbers for a few years. Kids are coming from all over the city. And so I just, I think that like we have to be thinking about how we distinguish between the types of facilities that are really like citywide facilities but sit in a place versus the types of facilities that give our neighborhoods that differential sense. Like I think the parks are a good example, right, of something where if you don't have a high quality park that you can walk to, that really makes a difference for people. I'm looking forward to us being able to dig into the data a little bit more that way.
Thank you, Councilor Bach. Karishma is on it. Councilor Lujan, you have the floor.
Yes. Thank you, Madam Chair, and I want to thank my colleagues for asking a lot of great questions. I want to thank community for still being with us. I want to thank the administration and, of course, the good pastor for letting us use this facility and giving us water. So I appreciate it. I think I said a lot of this earlier. I'm encouraged by the budget. I do want to highlight something that Elisa said, especially because in our earlier operating budget, someone made a comment about the work of equity being about making sure that everyone gets the same, and that's absolutely not what the work of equity is about. It's about that historical lens that Elisa so eloquently spoke to. Looking at the investments today, there are some that I'm really encouraged by, but you don't do this work without that historical lens of looking at which communities have been historically excluded and denied a seat at the table. And so I take that for what Councilor Orrell was stating when he's excited about what's happened and what's happening right now in District 4, but taking a historical lens, there's a lot to be upset about. And I think that it's important when we use the word equity that we use it with that historical lens, with the understanding that what we're trying to do is correct for past policy harm and not try to be like make sure everyone has an equal amount, because the work of equity means that some neighborhoods and some communities will have to have more if we are correcting for the past. And I say that and I look at Mattapan. And I say that and I look at how we're trudging slightly forward, but still not where I want to see us thinking about what the investments in a 5-year plan looks like for a place like Mattapan, whether we're talking about parks or whether we're talking about redesign. And I say that, and I'm actually really grateful to Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley, who got us the money for us to be re-envisioning what Blue Hill Avenue looks like. And so I want to actually ask about Cummins Highway, because that redesign brings up Mattapan numbers significantly, and I've been hearing, I live off of Cummins Highway, I'm right on the Hyde Park Mattapan line, and I'd like to be more intelligible when I'm talking to my neighbors about what's going on, especially when they see things happening that don't necessarily align with what we're saying is in design. So that's to you, Chief Franklin Hodge. And I don't mean that to sound critical, because there's a gas problem on my street that Chief Franklin Hodge is taking care of expeditiously. I did not text him last night respecting Sunday night limits, but he's been working on it. So I appreciate the work of your office, but there's been a lot of back and forth on Cummins Highway. I want to get it clear for the record.
Yeah, I mean, I would be happy to get a briefing for you on the Cummins Highway project. This has been ongoing since really since about 2020. I think some of the planning may have started even earlier than that, but what we have in this capital budget is roughly $26 million investment in reconstructing Cummins Highway from, I believe, Harvard to, or Wood Ave, depending which side you're on, down close to Mattapan Square. And this is, in some ways, will be one of the most intensive, this is the most intensive type of project we do within the Public Works Department, in the sense that we will be replacing more or less every aspect of the street. This is a street with a history of safety problems, of excessive speeds, of deadly crashes. It's a street that has bus routes running along it that does not serve bus riders well. It lacks shelter, it lacks places to sit. It's a street that is missing greenery and trees, or has ample opportunity for more of those things. And so we're doing a kind of top to bottom redesign of this street. There's been an incredible amount of community process around this, including monthly meetings focusing on specific topics like heat island effect and building age-friendly streets and the intersection of housing and street design projects, which has led us to the point now where I think actually on Thursday the PIC will be holding its final hearing on the design that we've developed for this street. I am excited. It's hard for me to overstate how excited I am about this project. Cummins Highway is going to be a showpiece for what is possible when we take the time, when we invest the money, when we really listen to community, we try to bring all of the different needs that we hear and synthesize them into one project, and then do that project right. It will take a few years to build because of the complexity of this, but I think when it is done, it will be a street that I will be proud to send people to from anywhere in the city and say, go look at Cummins Highway, see what we can do when we actually take the time and make the investment. I will be happy to share all the details, though, that you need and the briefing on what's been designed and any information about the process along the way.
Thank you, Chief Franklin Hodge. And I know that when this is done, this is something I've talked about before, but when we're doing, really getting that feedback from folks about what they want it to look like in the redesign, and it is really important that we are also interviewing and finding ways to elevate and uplift bus riders and folks that don't capture, that are not really present at these meetings, that are working their 3 jobs, that are not able to, because of language access issues, that we center them in the redesign of what it looks like. Because within the discussion of equity, there are layers, and there are ways that we need to make sure that we are prioritizing those who necessarily aren't able to make meetings and to give input. For ad nauseum have been asking that we do video interviews, that we incorporate video interviews into community meetings so that folks who cannot make the meetings, that their voices are heard, so that we are hearing from a variety and a diversity of voices. And I just hope that there are ways that we can do that really center people who don't have the free time.
Yeah, I really appreciate you making that point, and I think it's something we're increasingly trying to be very intentional about, is recognizing that the traditional community meeting is a format that works very well for some members of the community and very poorly for others. And so we are trying to augment the traditional styles of community meetings with exactly the kind of on-the-ground work, whether it's walking a street and talking to business owners, whether it's riding the bus or waiting for a bus with people, standing by a bike lane and talking to people at a light about their experience. All of these are the kinds of techniques that we're trying to bring into our planning processes so that we can hear from the widest possible voice. And we did a version of this in Cummins Highway. We're doing this in Blue Hill Ave, and we'll continue to incorporate this kind of deep outreach into the projects that we plan in the future.
Thank you, Chief Franklin Hodge. I have a few questions about bonds. Our bond issuance is going to increase by 27%, which is something that excites me because I think that we need to be doing a lot of more in terms of what we bond. Councilor Bach and then now Mayor Wu, but then former Councilor Michelle Wu held a hearing on green bonds and affordable housing bonds. And I think that we should be doing more of that, especially as we realize affordability and the building crisis that we have here. Wondering if the 20% increase in issuance is directly correlated to the Green New Deal for our schools. Like, is that is that the correlation of the increase of the bond issuance?
Can you clarify what 20%?
I think I saw it in the slides that we are increasing the bond issuance by 27%. And I think when I was at the earlier operating a hearing that we had on the operating budget, that was like the last statement either Jim or you made.
I see. Sorry, 1 second, let me just clarify.
It's just the increasing in borrowing levels that we're anticipating.
Compared to when?
By percentage.
The 23 plan?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Yes, okay, thank you. We are increasing our borrowing over the prior plan by 27%. I wouldn't say it's exactly attributable to the Green New Deal for BPS. When we're borrowing, we're sort of paying back for capital expenditures we've already incurred. And so I wouldn't say it's attributable necessarily particular to that one particular project, but as we're adding projects and as we're planning to add additional capacity to our plan, of which the Green New Deal for BPS is a significant investment and a significant part of it, that contributes to the amount of borrowing we need to do and the increase we need to do for borrowing.
Thank you. And then a question just in terms of I think I asked this when we held our hearing specifically on bonds, the decision to have a payback schedule of 20 versus 30 years. How does that affect how does that affect our budget? And are we right now meeting our 7% debt service limit?
So in this upcoming budget, we are probably going to be around 5%, but over the course of the 5-year plan, we expect that we will get closer to that 7% limit. I think the plan that we're talking about assumes that we will reach a level of debt service that is at that 7%. And your first question
The 20 versus 30.
Oh, yes. So if we were to go, so we tend to borrow for 20 years because that is, tends to be the useful life of the things we're investing in. If we were to switch to a 30-year schedule, just kind of thinking off the cuff here, that would extend the amount of time we have to pay off our debt, and so it could have the impact of reducing the annual debt service amount. However, there could be impacts to our rating by doing that. We just haven't done that sort of exploration with the rating agencies to understand what the impact of that could be on our cost of borrowing.
I ask these questions because I think that we tend to be conservative, and we have a AAA bond rating, and we're not really doing enough with that. When we're talking about, I think we had the hearing last year, and it's like we're working to 7%, we're working to 7%. And if we actually got there, and we actually, a lot of cities that have AAA bond ratings are paying off on a 30-year schedule. And so if we actually were leaning into, having a higher debt service percentage, we could be doing more work in our communities, in our Black and brown communities. That's my only interest in bonds and in our ability to do them. We have a limited purpose for doing them, but the purposes can serve our communities when we're talking about investments in our schools and investments in public infrastructure, investments in a green economy. I just want to see us do more of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
And I want us to have a vision for Mattapan in the capital budget. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilor Lujan. We'll just go for final comments, and I'll just wrap mine up first because I just wanted to make some points here. I just wanted to, if I didn't thank you previously, I wanted to thank you, Sam. Whenever I reach out to BPS, I know that I get a call back. I'm able to get results if there's an issue in my district. Commissioner Woods, every time I've contacted your office, I really appreciate the parks. Although I feel like we need more expensive and water fountains in every park. But I really appreciate that you have been able to turn that around and respond right away. Chief Franklin Hodge, streets in Roxbury are clean for the most part. And when there's a weekend or a holiday and it gets messy, I call and there's a response right away. I know that I've seen Roxbury be more or cleaner with you there in my time here as a counselor than I've experienced in the past. I really appreciate you for that. Definitely appreciate the speed humps. The constituents appreciate you. H Block has them in every street around at least a mile radius around my home. But there are a list of streets that I would love to add to that list. Seaver Street, Humboldt, Walnut, Washington I know is on your list already, but there are a few streets that I would love to talk to you about to repair in Roxbury. But I do appreciate the fast turnaround. I do appreciate that you are always very respectful and willing to work with me. And my constituents, Ashley and Jim, I really appreciate this conversation today. I think that you guys are open. Ultimately, the decision is not yours. You are doing the finance part of it. You're not driving the decisions. You may advise, maybe. I don't know how those conversations go, but I appreciate that. Chief Mariama, I know for a fact that we align, and you are certainly, sis, you're definitely fighting for the community in a racial equity way, in all equitable way, but also for climate justice. Extremely important, and you've prioritized things in a very practical and reasonable manner. I appreciate your work. Chief Irish, same. Every time there's been an issue and I come into a meeting and I'm like, rah, 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 stop it now, you actually pay attention to my barking. And then now I don't have to bark anymore. I can just call you. So I know that this team here is doing amazing work. I think that there's something wrong with the process. And the process that we talk to the mayor and we give her a list of, our capital priorities for our district. And then we get no straight across the list, or some of us do. And I think some of our lists may change, hopefully with, as you said, Chief Grafenberger, the mayor is eager to work with the community and open to listening. But that would take, excuse me, a process that people are actually responding from the administration. It's a tough job for the mayor to sit in her office. She's not answering calls. She's not emailing anybody. She's not scheduling herself. I don't schedule myself. I don't even know where I'm going tomorrow if I don't, you know what I mean, unless I look at it. So it is it's an overwhelming thing because someone else is handling all of that. She has a great team, but there needs a lot of improvement. We need to create a more transparent process, a more expedited or clear, intentional process to actually getting back to constituents. Constituents in District 7 feel unheard, especially the Black community. And they feel that we've scheduled meetings time and time and time again. We've organized, we've used creative resources with universities, we've worked on planning and designing 4 parcels to close the wealth gap, to build racial equity, to do a disparity study, to bring something like the Seaport or Fenway type of environment into Roxbury. And we have not gotten a response. In fact, we've gotten our meetings canceled, and we've been waiting for over 8 months. And so when you have that process that we have to sit with the mayor, and if it's a no, and the chiefs have to sit with the mayor, and the chiefs can't make the mayor, ultimately it's the mayor's decision, then the mayor has the hard task to prioritize downtown. Because if downtown doesn't get done, guess who takes it over? The state. Do we want that? I wouldn't want that. So just to be totally transparent, I want us to take control over revitalizing downtown. I agree with that idea, with that concept. The issue is that there's only so much money to go around, and to Councilor Lujan's point, can we be less conservative and look at our bonds in ways that we can actually use more money to address some of the racial equity issues? Someone mentioned gun violence or violence prevention. That means investing in social determinants of health and in people as whole people. We don't build holistic housing in District 7 or in a lot of Black communities. We don't actually create home ownership pathways. We don't have metrics to actually measure whether or not we're making progress, nor do we have metrics to understand or evaluations to monitor or to assess the need. So how do we know we're being equitable? We can't continue to use the language just to say that we've reacted to a problem, that our failed policies are actually being replaced by good policies. How do we know? We know that because we're doing a lot of good things. We know because we have people that are not inherently biased or racist working for the city. We know that 50 years ago, this conversation would have looked different. It is what it is. We know because the people sitting here, white, Black, brown, actually want racial equity for everybody. That's how we know. The problem is that the process sucks. The policies suck. How do we, and they're stupid. It's not like, oh, because we have to do it this way. Is it a practice? Is it necessary? Is it policy? Is it law? Then let's change it. Let's change the way we do it. And then let's create a more accessible way of reaching of what the community wants. So in terms of the next processes, I would like to actually replace May 2nd with a capital hearing part 2. And if it's virtual, that's fine. And I'd like to invite the community to be able to advocate. Please write Mayor Wu, send me a copy as a chair of Ways and Means as to the investments that you want to see in your community. Spread the word. I'll give the community time to organize. I will help you organize. Let's talk to the mayor. Let's get to her and say, this is a nice budget, but can Black people have more? That's what it comes down to. It really comes down to, it's not a bad budget, but can the poor and lower socioeconomic class get more? And so email Mayor Wu, lobby her, call her, do whatever you gotta do, ask for a meeting, and send me the copy. That's the point here. It's not that these people are going to change the capital investments or the proposal. It's Mayor Wu's decision. She can make that decision by herself. And as far as the, obviously, operating budget, that's, you can actually email us about amendment suggestions. This is what it looks like to do transparent government, that we are honest about what the process is and that we admit to what's flawed so that we can change it. I hope you guys can appreciate that. I certainly appreciate your work, and I sincerely feel that everyone here wants good for everybody. And the other thing I would say is I have a list of what my constituents told me that they want in District 7. I know that we want housing, we want placemaking. I know that we have a lot of repairments to do. I know that we wanted a study for senior center. We wanted a study for a sensory, safe space for kids on a spectrum. I know that we wanted a theater, like theater, in District 7. I surveyed the community. Over thousands of people answered. I have the results, and it hasn't gone anywhere. So I will publish that, and I will create a survey where people can sign a petition to get to Mayor Wu so that you can tell her, we support Councilor Anderson's or what the community has asked for. This is just me advocating for my district, and I'm going to do it in the best way that I know how, and it's by making it transparent. As far as the next capital hearing, part 2, can you guys do me a favor and check your calendars if you're going to be available? Because I've already invited you, but I wonder if I change the time.
What time are you thinking?
What time would be good? Can we get a vote here on this panel?
What day?
What day is it? Like for a specific day? Or
For May 2nd. We have something that I've already invited you, but it was at 2. I already invited you to a public hearing testimony, just for testimony. But if we do part 2 of this, and there's a lot of questions. I know my colleagues are upset because we didn't even get to half of the conversation, the questions. And I just wanted to just be intentional about it to do part 2.
At that 2 o'clock time slot?
At that 2 o'clock time slot, we'll do a virtual so the community can participate. Nods? Can we get nods? Virtual 2 o'clock time slot for May 2nd. It's a voting day? Is it a voting day?
Yeah, for the special election.
Oh.
And that's the day you get your nomination papers too.
What is it, Megan, what's the next hearing that I have on here? May 9th. What about May 9th at 6 p.m.? I invited you to that too. I can't do it. But Brian, can you do that? Commissioner Woods, Sa?
I can't do the evening.
No. We should talk offline, Councilor Worrell said. Okay.
Neil's in the back. Neil's in the back raising his hand.
Neil, what is Neil saying?
Yeah, we can definitely schedule this later on. I think that Ajar and the mayor office can certainly handle it.
Okay. As long as we promise for a commitment to get back together, I'm almost afraid of rescheduling it. Nobody shows up. But it's going to have to be a 6 p.m. in community. I think that the community prefers that. So I'll get back to you guys on that schedule. Councilor Braden, you have the floor for closing remarks.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for still hanging in with us this evening, and thank you to all the panelists and from the administration. And thank you, Madam Chair, for your leadership and leading this great conversation this evening. There's one issue that's I'm looking at the fire department. There's a hazmat facility on Holton Street in Alston, and it's we've talked about this for years, and I don't see it anywhere in the list. So I'm flagging that as another issue that we need to look at. Is the fire department hazmat training facility? They're going to be displaced, and they're needing a new home, and it doesn't seem to be on the list of priorities. Just flagging that. Thank you all. I look forward to the next phase of this discussion about capital planning, and thank you. And I'll also echo Councillor Worrell's request for a look back over the last 10 years of capital projects, because I know we've had changed administrations and changed priorities, and things get shifted around. It'd be nice to just see what the landscape looks like. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Council Braden. Chief Grafenberger or Jim, if you guys want to send us the raw data, we'll have our analysis take care of it. Thank you. Council President Flynn, are you here?
I think you're next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, wanted to say thank you to you, Madam Chair, and to the administration team. I highlighted some of my top priorities, including the HVAC systems and several others as well. I don't need specifically an answer now or tonight on an issue I'm going to address, but can you check on the status of the proposal for a new library in South Boston for me?
Thank you. Was that a question, Councilor?
Yeah, that was a question. If someone can get back to me tomorrow, that would be great. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much, Council President Flynn. Councilor Murphy?
Just thank you and good night.
Councilor Worrell?
Just want to say thank you to all the community members that came out. Also want to thank Councilor Anderson for leading the conversation in the middle of the community. So thank you for that. And we'd love to, Jim and Chief, love to get a historical context of capital investments throughout the city of Boston. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Councilor Rowe. Who's next?
My next.
Councilor Bach?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to quickly echo Councillor Louis-Jean on my excitement about the fact that the number on this capital plan is 4.2, where it was 3.6 last year. That's the biggest jump we've seen in any year I can think of. And it absolutely gets to the point that we were raising last session, as Councillor Louis-Jean said, and then we were raising together this session, which is this idea that we should absolutely, in the city of Boston, be maximizing the benefit of our AAA bond rating. And the whole point of having it is to use it. And the reality is that we have a very responsible 7% limit, and we never hit it, in part because we have historically budgeted as though we were going to get everything done in the year. And as has been discussed, we know with project manager constraints and just like real time constraints, we don't get everything done in the year. And so to me, knocking us up further and further, I mean, that's the way that we grow the pie, right? It's the same thing we talk about in housing when we want to get more affordable housing and both home ownership and rental built and think about all different levels. We can't just be fighting over scraps. We have to grow the pie. And it's the same thing here. Like almost everything in this capital plan is a good public good, and we just have to be able to do more. And the way that we do more is we grow the plan. So the fact that the plan is going up by $600 million this year is huge. And I think the idea that, as you said, Chief, that we're on a trajectory to continue to grow it more is super exciting. And it's also, by the way, the only way that we're going to do a Green New Deal for BPS and also get in the business of housing on public land and also like invest in our BCYFs and our libraries and our pools and everything that we've been talking today in our parks, right? Never mind like something like Moakley, which is like such a critical environmental need for the city and also offers a great opportunity for respite for BHA families and beyond. So I think sometimes when we talk about numbers, we can lose a sense of scale. And so I really wanted to echo Councillor Louis-Jean in saying that $600 million as an increase in 1 year in the capital budget is an enormous thing and something that I'm very excited about. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Bach. Councilor Mejia?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you again for bringing us here and hosting, and thank you everyone for showing up, because this is part of the process. And I think I just want to uplift a few things. One, to Senator Wilkerson's comment in terms of the importance of showing up and being in community with each other. The vibe is different. You could feel people's energy. You could see their nonverbal communication. You can actually be in community. So I think that there is definitely a benefit and a shift to this process, and I think more of this is definitely needed. And I think that that also gives us a level of accountability in terms of who's in the Zoom and whether or not they are definitely here for us. So I just think that that's something that I just want to underscore. And I wanted to just uplift two more things. One is the dashboard. I agree with Councilor Breeden. I think that I've been saying that I'm the dashboard queen. I want a dashboard for everything here in the city of Boston, because accountability and transparency, we have to be able to go on a website and see dollar for dollar what's our return on investment, where projects are, where do they stand, how many dollars are going into procurement. Like, all of that level of accountability and transparency is key. And then the last thing that I want to uplift, that I really, and I didn't say this earlier, but I'm all for the universal basic income for Boston residents. I was part of FYI 12 or something years ago, when now it's Up Together, and I was one of those families that was living check to check, you know, on every single type of resource that you could possibly imagine. And it was because they believed that even though I was poor, that I would know how to get myself out of poverty. And it was through that where they just literally invested in families with literally no strings attached. I was able to rebuild my life. So I just think that I'm really encouraged by the city, and I know that there's been some conversation around that, so I definitely want to uplift that and think it's something definitely for us to look into. And the last thing that I will say is that, you know, in my third year now in this budget, every year I learned something new. The first year I didn't ask Marty Walsh for anything because I didn't know that that's what you were supposed to do. The second year I learned that what you need to do is negotiate with that person and ask for the things that you want. And it's like, I don't really like to play politics, but the fact that we have to do all of that behind the scenes, negotiating, and sometimes we negotiate against our own better in judgment, I just think that this process and this year, we definitely need to seize the moment to do business differently. And that if we're not leading with community voice, if we're not really looking at what these impacts are going to have on the long game, then we're just setting ourselves up for another round of, we're going to come back, we're going to ask you, what did you spend it on, blah, 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 blah. And it just feels like we're a little hamster in this wheel. And I want to get off that wheel and really think about how we're going to do business differently, and that's going to include changing our behavior. So I want to also shout out to Dwayne for that conversation around, we're not being displaced, we're being replaced. And I think that if we are going to really meet this moment and stay here in the city of Boston, then we're going to have to invest in Boston residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Council Mejia. Council Lujan.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I just want to thank you again for bringing this conversation to community. I want to echo what Councilor Bach was saying. I think you work really hard to get a good credit score, and you got to do something with it, and you got to do something with it that really is going to be transformative for our communities when we're facing so many crises. I'll also just say, you know, thank you for bringing this conversation to community. I think a lot about information asymmetry, and it's a big problem when these are our collective tax dollars. And so this being really trying to center community in terms of understanding the budget, which can seem sort of like this deep, like this complicated thing, all these terms that we don't understand, but really it's about how are we using our dollars to serve you and to show up in community. And so I hope that you all also understand that as part of our collective role, not just us as elected officials, but we sit in these offices and sometimes we lose sight that the whole purpose is to really show up and serve and explain to residents what we're doing. Because crunching numbers and working really hard to chase a rating without doing the work without understanding that's also must be in service for the people, I think is incredibly important. So I look forward to the additional conversation that we're going to have about budget in community, in chambers, and virtually. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I'd like to thank my colleagues for being here. Thank you to the community. Thank you to the staff and folks who are here who didn't even sit on the panel but waited here patiently. I appreciate you. Karishma, thank you so much. And to the administrative staff, Shane, Ethan, Megan, thank you all for making this happen. Again, thank you to Reverend Willie Broderick and everyone who made this happen. There is a schedule, and I publish it weekly online, and then I send you emails. If you like to be added to the subscription and you're not getting them, please email me. I'll wait for you. I'll wait. Please email me, and I will send you the full schedule for the entire budget season. I'll also send you a copy of the RFI questions. I can send you a copy of everything that I've asked for District 7. If any other counselors are willing to make that transparent as well, I'm happy to send it out as well. I will be posting it online. I will be creating a petition so people can sign up. Again, don't forget to email Mayor Wu and also CC myself as a chair asking for these things in the budget. I've seen Crane Ledge and all these other parks and environmental issues and transportation be prioritized based on the mobilizing and the lobbying, but based on, I guess, whatever the priority is. But hopefully we make people, bodies, priority as well, even though environment is for the body. Sorry, Chief Mariam, I know you're probably looking over here, but if we take care of people and their social determinants of health, including climate justice, then I think that this conversation may feel a little bit more equitable. So shout out to the admin, to administration, all the chiefs. Thank you so much for hanging in there with us. Look forward to part 2. I hope that you will show up to public testimonies just to listen. I know that you guys can see it remotely, especially if you're recorded, you can go review it. But if we are doing public testimony, we look forward to seeing you, because often it feels like the community comes and talks, give their public testimony, and there's nobody shows up to actually listen to the public testimony. And I know that we're all busy, but, take it from the Chair of Ways and Means, who's holding all these hearings. Council Bach knows what I'm talking about. If we can sit through these hearings, then we expect that you can try to show up to the public testimony so that people are just not talking to the wall. They feel like someone is actually listening. So we'd appreciate that. Or that Mayor Wu sends someone in her stead to take notes and actively listen and respond to the public. Thank you all. If there aren't any final comments to the administration panel and counselors, all right. Thank you. This meeting is adjourned.